Chapter 4. Faith in Your Ability. Visualization of, and belief in, attainment of desire. The second step toward riches. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When faith is blended with thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration. The subconscious then translates it and transmits it to infinite intelligence. The emotions of faith, love, and sex are the most powerful of all the major positive emotions. When the three are blended, they have the effect of coloring thought in such a way that it instantly reaches the subconscious mind. There, it is changed into a form that induces a response from infinite intelligence. Editor's comments. In the preceding paragraph, Napoleon Hill uses two terms, faith and infinite intelligence, both of which may convey to the reader a religious connotation that Hill did not intend. The following will define the meaning of the words as Hill uses them in the following chapter. In modern usage, the word faith has become almost interchangeable with religious belief, which is not the way Hill uses the word. Faith, as it is used here, means having confidence, trust, and an absolute unwavering belief that you can do something. And in order for you to have faith in yourself as Hill means it, it has to be true on a subconscious level. If you have a nagging doubt in the back of your mind, or if you are just going through the motions of pretending you believe, it won't work, because your subconscious will know your doubts. Unless you have absolute total confidence, unless you are convinced without question, then you don't have faith. Hill uses the term infinite intelligence to identify that part of the human mind and thinking process that produces hunches, flashes of insight, and leaps of logic. Hill's concept has similarities to what psychologist Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. And on another level, it is very close to what contemporary psychologists refer to as working in the flow state, or being in the zone. Infinite intelligence is discussed in greater depth in later chapters. Hill also uses another term, the subconscious mind, that should be commented on before the reader proceeds with this chapter. Although there are differing schools of thought, in general modern psychology developed from the pioneering work of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Each believed that the human mind operates on both a conscious and an unconscious level, but they differed on the role the subconscious plays and the way it influences attitude and action. Through his own research and studies, Napoleon Hill developed a theory of the conscious and subconscious that is closest to the Jungian view. The following briefly describes the basis of Hill's view. The conscious mind. Your conscious mind receives information through the five senses of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. Your conscious mind keeps track of what you need for thinking and operating, and it filters out what you don't need. Your conscious mind, and what your memory retains, is the intelligence with which you normally think, reason, and plan. The subconscious mind. Your subconscious has access to all the same information your conscious mind receives, but it doesn't reason the way your conscious mind does. It takes everything literally. It doesn't make value judgments. It does not filter, and it does not forget. You cannot command your conscious mind to reach out and dip into your subconscious mind. However, under certain circumstances, all those forgotten facts and ideas that are always there in your subconscious can, if they are firmly rooted, influence your conscious attitudes and actions. This is the end of the editor's comments. How to develop faith. The following statement is very important in understanding the importance of autosuggestion in the transmutation of desire into its physical or monetary equivalent, namely, faith is a state of mind that may be induced or created by affirmation or repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. The repetition of affirmations is like giving orders to your subconscious mind, and it is the only known method of voluntary development of the emotion of faith, absolute belief that you can do something. As an illustration, consider why you are reading this book. You want to acquire the ability to transmute the intangible thought impulse of desire into its physical counterpart, money. By following the instructions laid down in the later chapters on autosuggestion and the subconscious mind, you will learn techniques to convince your subconscious mind that you believe you will receive that for which you ask. Your subconscious will act upon that belief and pass it back to you in the form of faith, followed by definite plans for procuring that which you desire. Faith in yourself and your abilities is a state of mind that you will be able to develop at will after you have mastered the 13 principles in this book. This is true because faith is a state of mind that will develop naturally within you when you use and apply these principles. The emotions, or the feeling portion of thoughts, are what give your thoughts vitality, life, and action. The emotions of faith, love, and sex, when mixed with any thought impulse, give it even greater action. All thoughts that have been emotionalized, given feeling, and mixed with faith, absolute belief in your ability, begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent or counterpart. However, this is not only true of thought impulses that have been mixed with faith, but it is true with any emotion, including negative emotions. What this means is that the subconscious mind will translate into its physical equivalent a thought impulse of a negative or destructive nature just as readily as it will act upon thought impulses of a positive or constructive nature. The following statement made by a noted criminologist illustrates the point. When men first come into contact with crime, they abhor it. If they remain in contact with crime for a time, they become accustomed to it and endure it. If they remain in contact with it long enough, they finally embrace it and become influenced by it. This is the equivalent of saying that a negative impulse of thought that is repeatedly passed on to the subconscious mind often enough is finally accepted and acted upon by the subconscious mind. The subconscious then proceeds to translate that impulse into its physical equivalent by the most practical procedure available. This also accounts for the strange phenomenon that so many millions of people experience, referred to as bad luck. There are millions of people who believe themselves doomed to poverty and failure because of some strange force they call bad luck, over which they believe they have no control. But the truth is that they are the creators of their own misfortunes, because this negative belief in bad luck is picked up by the subconscious mind and translated into its physical equivalent. Your belief, or faith, is the element that will determine the action of your subconscious mind. Once again, let me stress that you will benefit by passing on to your subconscious mind any desire that you wish translated into its physical or monetary equivalent in a state of expectancy or belief that the transmutation will actually take place. The subconscious mind will transmute into its physical equivalent, by the most direct and practical way available, any order that is given to it in a state of belief or faith that the order will be carried out. At this point, it should also be noted that because of the way that the subconscious operates, there is nothing to stop you from deceiving your subconscious mind when giving it instructions through autosuggestion. That is what I did when I deceived my son's subconscious mind. To make this deception more realistic, when you call upon your subconscious mind, you must conduct yourself just as you would if you were already in possession of the material thing that you are demanding. Editor's comments. It is an axiom of contemporary motivation theory that the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. One of the most frequently cited studies supporting this concept was done with a group of basketball players. The players were divided into 3 teams, and the players on each team were tested on their ability to make free throws. The teams were then separated for a period of time, and each team was given instructions which they were told would improve their abilities. One team was instructed to practice making baskets on a daily basis. The second team was instructed not to practice during the period and not to even think about basketball. The third team was also instructed not to practice during the period. but instead the members were told to spend their daily practice time visualizing in detail the process of making baskets. At the end of the experiment, the teams were again tested. The team that rested showed a decrease in ability. The team that practiced showed a marked increase in ability. And the team that didn't practice, but visualized making baskets, showed an increase in ability almost equal to those who had practiced daily. As Hill says, you can deceive your subconscious through autosuggestion. If you convincingly plant an idea in your subconscious will accept and work with the idea as though it were a fact. But the key word is convincingly. If you try to send a message to your subconscious, but in the back of your mind you have a nagging doubt whether it will work, your subconscious will pick that up also. You will have sent mixed messages that cancel each other out. That is why Hill stresses the importance of doing it with faith. Your subconscious will not judge if it is true or false, positive or negative, but it does respond to the power of the input, how emotionalized the thought is. This is the end of the editor's comment. It is essential for you to encourage the positive emotions as the dominating forces of your mind. But faith in yourself doesn't come from merely reading instructions. Now that you understand the theory, you must begin to apply it. By experimenting and practicing, you will develop your ability to mix faith with any order you give to your subconscious. When you have faith in your ability, then you can give your subconscious mind instructions, which it will accept and act upon immediately. When your mind is dominated by positive emotions, it will encourage the state of mind known as faith. Faith in yourself is a state of mind that you can create by autosuggestion. All through the ages, religious leaders have admonished people to have faith. They say to have faith in this, that, and the other dogma or creed, but they have failed to tell people how to have faith. They have not stated that faith is a state of mind that may be induced by self-suggestion. In language that anyone can understand, this book explains the principle through which faith in your ability to accomplish a goal may be developed where it does not already exist. Before we begin, you should be reminded again that faith is the eternal elixir that gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. Faith is the starting point of all accumulation of riches. Faith is the basis of all miracles and of all mysteries that cannot be analyzed by the rules of science. Faith is the only known antidote for failure. Faith is the element that, when mixed with desire, gives you direct communication with infinite intelligence. Faith is the element that transforms the ordinary vibration of thought created by the human mind into the spiritual equivalent. Faith is the only way the force of infinite intelligence can be harnessed and used. The magic of self-suggestion. It is a fact that you will come to believe whatever you repeat to yourself, whether the statement is true or false. If you repeat a lie over and over, you will eventually accept that lie as truth. Moreover, you will believe it to be the truth. You are what you are because of the dominating thoughts that you permit to occupy your mind. Thoughts that you deliberately place in your own mind and encourage with sympathy, and with which you mix any one or more of the emotions, constitute the motivating forces that direct and control your every movement, act, and deed. The following sentence is a very significant statement of truth. Thoughts that are mixed with any of the feelings of emotions become like a magnetic force, which attracts other similar or related thoughts. A thought that is magnetized with one of the emotions may be compared to a seed. When it is planted in fertile soil, it germinates, grows, and multiplies itself over and over again. What was originally one small seed becomes countless millions of seeds of the same kind. The human mind is constantly attracting vibrations that are in sync with whatever dominates the mind. Any thought, idea, plan, or purpose that you hold in your mind attracts a host of its relatives. Add these relatives to its own force, and it grows until it becomes the prime motivator of the person in whose mind it has been housed. Now, let us go back to the starting point. How can the original seed of an idea, plan, or purpose be planted in the mind? The answer? Any idea, plan, or purpose may be placed in the mind through repetition of thought. This is why you are asked to write out a statement of your major purpose, or definite chief aim. Commit it to memory, and repeat it out loud day after day until these vibrations of sound have reached your subconscious mind. You are what you are because of the dominating thoughts that you permit to occupy your mind. If you choose to, you can throw off any bad influences from your past and build your own life the way you want it to be. For instance, by taking inventory of your mental assets and liabilities, you might discover that your greatest weakness is lack of self-confidence. This can be overcome and translated into courage through the principle of autosuggestion. You can do this by writing out a set of simply stated positive thought impulses, memorizing them, and repeating them until they become a part of the working equipment of your subconscious mind. The following is an example for someone whose definite purpose is to overcome a lack of self-confidence. Self-confidence formula. 1. I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment, and I here and now promise to render such action. 2. I realize the dominating thoughts of my mind will eventually reproduce themselves in outward physical action and gradually transform themselves into physical reality. Therefore, I will concentrate my thoughts for 30 minutes each day, visualizing the person I intend to become. In this way, I will create in my mind a clear mental picture. 3. I know, through the principle of autosuggestion, that any desire I persistently hold in my mind will eventually find some practical means of attaining my objective. Therefore, I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. 4. I have clearly written down a description of my definite chief aim in life, and I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. 5. I fully realize that no wealth or position can last unless it is built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will engage in no transaction that does not benefit all whom it affects. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use and the cooperation of others. I will persuade others to help me because of my willingness to help others. I will eliminate hatred, envy, jealousy, selfishness, and cynicism by developing love for all humanity, because I know that a negative attitude toward others can never bring me success. I will cause others to believe in me because I will believe in them and in myself. I will sign my name to this formula, commit it to memory, and repeat it aloud once a day, with full faith that it will gradually influence my thoughts and actions so that I will become a self-reliant and successful person. Behind this formula is a law of nature that psychologists call autosuggestion or self-suggestion. It is a proven technique that will work for your success if it is used constructively. On the other hand, if used destructively, it will destroy just as readily. In this statement may be found a very significant truth, namely that those who go down in defeat and end their lives in poverty, misery, and distress do so because of negative application of the principle of autosuggestion. All impulses of thought have a tendency to clothe themselves in their physical equivalent. The disaster of negative thinking. The subconscious mind makes no distinction between constructive and destructive thought impulses. It works with the material we feed it through our thought impulses. The subconscious mind will translate into reality a thought driven by fear just as readily as it will translate into reality a thought driven by courage or faith. Just as electricity will turn the wheels of industry and render useful service if used constructively, it will snuff out life if wrongly used. So too will the law of autosuggestion lead you to peace and prosperity, or down into the valley of misery, failure, and death. It depends on your degree of understanding and application of it. If you fill your mind with fear or doubt, and if you do not believe in your ability to connect with and use the forces of infinite intelligence, then you will not be able to use those forces. The law of autosuggestion will take your lack of belief and use that doubt as a pattern by which your subconscious mind will translate it into its physical equivalent. Editor's comments. When you have faith in your ability to accomplish what you want, it not only firmly plants ideas in your subconscious, but it then works to reinforce itself. When you have faith in your abilities, part of what you must have faith in is that it is possible to tap into infinite intelligence. And because you have faith that it will work, your conscious mind won't be resistant. When your conscious doesn't resist, your subconscious mind can send creative ideas to your conscious mind more easily. Then the more you see the power working in your life, the easier it is for you to act on faith the next time. Will it work for you? You will never know unless you relax your resistance and just have faith that it will. This is the end of the editor's comment. Like the wind that carries one ship east and another west, the law of autosuggestion will lift you up or pull you down according to the way you set your sails of thought. The law of autosuggestion, through which any person may rise to altitudes of achievement that stagger the imagination, is well described in the following verse. Observe the words that have been emphasized, and you will catch the deep meaning that the poet had in mind. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but you think you can't, it is almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out in the world we find, success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. Editor's comments. As noted at the beginning of this chapter, the way in which Napoleon Hill uses the word faith is meant to have no religious connotation. However, it would be impossible for Hill to write this chapter without acknowledging the power of religious faith. Therefore, in the following two paragraphs, when Hill discusses Jesus Christ and Mahatma Gandhi as exemplifying the power of faith, he is referring to their personal faith, the absolute trust in his beliefs that Jesus exhibited, and Gandhi's total conviction and confidence in his cause. In this way, they perfectly exemplify thought impulse mixed with faith. This is the end of the editor's comment. If you wish evidence of the power of faith, study the achievements of men and women who have employed it. At the head of the list comes the Nazarene. The basis of Christianity is faith, no matter how many people may have perverted or misinterpreted the meaning of this great force. The sum and substance of the teachings and the achievements of Christ, which may have been interpreted as miracles, were nothing more nor less than faith. If there are any such phenomena as miracles, they are produced only through the state of mind known as faith. Consider Mahatma Gandhi of India, one of the most astounding examples of the possibilities of faith. Gandhi wielded more potential power than any man living in his time, and he had this power despite the fact that he had none of the orthodox tools of power, such as money, battleships, soldiers, and materials of warfare. Gandhi had no money, no home. He did not own a suit of clothes, but he did have power. How did he come by that power? He created it out of his understanding of the principle of faith and through his ability to transplant that faith into the minds of 200 million people. Gandhi accomplished the astounding feat of influencing 200 million minds to coalesce and move in unison as a single mind. What other force on earth, except faith, could do as much. How an idea built a fortune. Editor's comment. Although the following story is not exclusively about faith, and it makes no mention of autosuggestion or the subconscious mind, Napoleon Hill included it at this point in every edition of Think and Grow Rich. In fact, as Hill says, this story illustrates at least 6 of the 13 principles of success. But faith is at the center of it. If the central figure, Charles M. Schwab, had not mixed his big idea with absolute unwavering faith that he could pull it off, the whole history of American business would have been different. This is the end of the editor's comment. The event chosen for this illustration dates back to 1900, when the United States Steel Corporation was being formed. As you read the story, keep in mind the following fundamental facts and you will understand how ideas have been converted into huge fortunes. First, the United States Steel Corporation was born in the mind of Charles M. Schwab in the form of an idea he created through his imagination. Second, he mixed faith with his idea. Third, he formulated a plan for the transformation of his idea into physical and financial reality. Fourth, he put his plan into action with his famous speech at the University Club. Fifth, he applied and followed through on his plan with persistence and backed it with firm decision until it had been fully carried out. Sixth, he prepared the way for success by a burning desire for success. If you are one of those who have often wondered how great fortunes are accumulated, this story of the creation of the United States Steel Corporation will be enlightening. If you have any doubt that a person can think and grow rich, this story should dispel that doubt. You can plainly see in the story of United States Steel the application of a major portion of the principles described in this book. This astounding description of the power of an idea was dramatically told by John Lowell in the New York World Telegram, with whose courtesy it is here reprinted. Editor's comments. In order for the modern reader to fully appreciate the following newspaper story, it is appropriate at this point to provide some background information about the main players. Charles M. Schwab was Andrew Carnegie's right-hand man and president of the Carnegie Steel Corporation. Andrew Carnegie was a wealthy and powerful steel baron whose company controlled 25% of the iron and steel production in America. J.P. Morgan was a wealthy and powerful Wall Street banker whose company had arranged the financing for many of the major industrial companies in America at the beginning of the 20th century. All the reader needs to know about the other men mentioned in the story is that at the beginning of the 20th century, finance, business, and industry were dominated by a few hundred men, most of whom had amassed great fortunes through some connection with the railroads that had opened the country. These people were well known to readers of the New York World Telegram because of their financial influence. And that sets the stage for the following newspaper article, which is not only a fascinating story about the power of faith in an idea, but also a wonderful example of the irreverent writing style that was used by many newspaper journalists of the day. This is the end of the editor's comment. A pretty after-dinner speech for $1 billion. When on the evening of December 12, 1900, some 80 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club on Fifth Avenue to do honor to a young man from out of the West, not half a dozen of the guests realized they were to witness the most significant episode in American industrial history. J. Edward Simmons and Charles Stuart Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles M. Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh, had arranged the dinner to introduce the 38-year-old steel man to Eastern banking society. But they didn't expect him to stampede the convention. They warned him, in fact, that the bosoms within New York's stuffed shirts would not be responsive to oratory, and that if he didn't want to bore the Stillmans and Harrimans and Vanderbilts, he had better limit himself to 15 or 20 minutes of polite vaporings and let it go at that. Even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right hand of Schwab as became his imperial dignity, intended to grace the banquet table with his presence only briefly, and so far as the press and public were concerned, the whole affair was of so little moment that no mention of it found its way into print the next day. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests ate their way through the usual 7 or 8 courses. There was little conversation, and what there was of it was restrained. Few of the bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of the Monongahela, and none knew him well. But before the evening was over, they, and with them Money Master Morgan, were to be swept off their feet, and a billion-dollar baby, the United States Steel Corporation, was to be conceived. It is perhaps unfortunate for the sake of history that no record of Charlie Schwab's speech at the dinner ever was made. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat ungrammatical, for the niceties of language never bothered Schwab, full of epigram and threaded with wit. But aside from that, it had a galvanic force and effect upon the 5 billions of estimated capital that was represented by the diners. After it was over, and the gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where, dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable seat, they talked for an hour more. The magic of the Schwab personality had been turned on full force, but what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down for the aggrandizement of steel. Many other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of the biscuit, wire and hoop, sugar, rubber, whiskey, oil, or chewing gum combinations. Editor's comments. The Random House College Dictionary defines a trust as an illegal combination of industrial or commercial companies in which the stock is controlled by a central board of trustees, thus making it possible to control prices and destroy competition. Many of America's new industrial companies had grown so quickly that they were not yet profitable. They were saddled with huge debt incurred in raising the capital to finance their rapid expansion, and at the same time they were faced with having to cut costs and slash prices or go out of business. The answer for many was to join up with others in related industries to form what were called trusts or combinations. Although trusts were illegal since the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, companies still tried to find ways to monopolize their industries, and if their efforts weren't technically trusts, they were something very close. The one thing the large company owners who assembled these trusts needed was cash to buy up the many smaller companies they would have to own in order to effectively dominate an industry. J.P. Morgan was the banker who financed many such takeovers. This is the end of the editor's comment. John W. Gates, the gambler, had urged it, but Morgan distrusted him. The Moore boys, Bill and Jim, Chicago stock jobbers who had glued together a match trust and a cracker corporation, had urged it and failed. Elbert H. Gary, the sanctimonious country lawyer, wanted to foster it, but he wasn't big enough to be impressive. Until Schwab's eloquence took J.P. Morgan to the heights from which he could visualize the solid results of the most daring financial undertaking ever conceived, the project was regarded as a delirious dream of easy-money crackpots. The financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract thousands of small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition-crushing combinations had become operative in the steel world through the devices of that jovial business pirate, John W. Gates. Gates already had formed the American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of small concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal Steel Company. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and operated by 53 partners, those other combinations were picayune. They might combine to their heart's content, but the whole lot of them couldn't make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it, too. Editor's comments. Andrew Carnegie was born in Scotland and came to America when he was just a boy. He made his first move to join the elite group of American tycoons when he quit his job as a bobbin boy in a cotton mill, earning $1.20 a week, and got a job as a telegraph messenger boy. He soon taught himself to operate a telegraph key, which got him hired as personal telegrapher and secretary to the head of the Pennsylvania Railroad. It wasn't long before he'd worked his way up the ranks to superintendent of the Pittsburgh division, which in turn put him in a position to become an early investor in the Pullman Company, which became the leading manufacturer of railway cars. Carnegie's investment in Pullman and some successful real estate ventures gave him the capital to go into business for himself. At the end of the Civil War, Carnegie left railroading and started a company that built iron bridges for railroad companies. From building iron bridges, it was a short step to starting his own steel mill, which led him to acquire control of other steel mills, then his own coal fields to supply his smelters, then his own ore boats and rail lines to haul the ore and coal. Because of Carnegie's vertical integration and his use of the most up-to-date manufacturing methods, he was able to sell top-grade steel at the lowest price. He managed to drop the price of steel from $140 a ton to $20 a ton. By 1899, the Carnegie Steel Company controlled about 25% of the iron and steel production in America. The smaller steel manufacturers couldn't compete with Carnegie, so they went to J.P. Morgan for help. He arranged for the financing, and a wide-ranging alliance was put together of companies that were in the business of manufacturing products made from steel. Part of the deal was that they would not buy steel from Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was not about to be put out of business by a collection of small companies. He announced that he would buy or build his own manufacturing companies to produce finished goods made of steel. This is the end of the editor's comments, and the New York World Telegram story continues. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle he had viewed, first with amusement and then with resentment, the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto, he hadn't been interested in wire, pipe, hoops, or sheet. Instead, he was content to sell such companies the raw steel and let them work it into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So it was that in the speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be no trust at all, a plum pudding, as one writer said, without the plums. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900, undoubtedly carried the inference, though not the pledge, that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world future for steel, of reorganization for efficiency, of specialization, of the scrapping of unsuccessful mills and concentration of effort on the flourishing properties, of economies in the ore traffic, of economies in overhead and administrative departments, of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy. Their purposes, he inferred, had been to create monopolies, raise prices, and pay themselves fat dividends out of privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in an era when everything cried for expansion. By cheapening the cost of steel, he argued, an ever-expanding market would be created. More uses for steel would be devised, and a goodly portion of the world trade could be captured. Actually, though he did not know it, Schwab was an apostle of modern mass production. Editor's comments. For J.P. Morgan, all of Schwab's talk about economies of scale and expanding markets meant only one thing. Until that night, it was assumed that Andrew Carnegie would continue building his own manufacturing companies to compete with the steel trusts that Morgan had helped put together. Morgan knew that for Carnegie to do so would require an enormous amount of capital, and Morgan also knew that Carnegie had always been strongly against raising money by selling stock in his company. What Schwab seemed to be implying was that rather than going to Wall Street for the money needed to fight the trusts, Carnegie might be interested in selling his business. This is the end of the editor's comment. New York World Telegram story continues. So the dinner at the University Club came to an end. Morgan went home to think about Schwab's rosy predictions. Schwab went back to Pittsburgh to run the steel business for Andrew Carnegie, while Gary and the rest went back to their stock tickers to fiddle around in anticipation of the next move. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feast of reason Schwab had placed before him. When he had assured himself that no financial indigestion was to result, he sent for Schwab, and found that young man rather coy. Mr. Carnegie, Schwab indicated, might not like it if he found his trusted company president had been flirting with the Emperor of Wall Street, the street upon which Carnegie was resolved never to tread. Then it was suggested by John W. Gates, the go-between, that if Schwab happened to be in the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia, J.P. Morgan might also happen to be there. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so on the elder man's pressing invitation, Schwab went to New York and presented himself at the door of the financier's library. Now, certain economic historians have professed the belief that from the beginning to the end of the drama, the stage was set by Andrew Carnegie, that the dinner to Schwab, the famous speech, the Sunday night conference between Schwab and the Money King, were events arranged by the canny Scot. The truth is exactly the opposite. When Schwab was called in to consummate the deal, he didn't even know whether the little boss, as Andrew was called, would so much as listen to an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men whom Andrew regarded as being endowed with something less than holiness. But Schwab did take into the conference with him, in his own handwriting, 6 sheets of copperplate figures, representing to his mind the physical worth and the potential earning capacity of every steel company he regarded as an essential star in the new metal firmament. 4 men pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan, steadfast in his belief in the divine right of money. With him was his aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, whom Morgan scorned as a gambler and used as a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the processes of making and selling steel than any whole group of men then living. Throughout that conference, the Pittsburgher's figures were never questioned. If he said a company was worth so much, then it was worth that much and no more. He was insistent, too, upon including in the combination only those concerns he nominated. He had conceived a corporation in which there would be no duplication, not even to satisfy the greed of friends who wanted to unload their companies upon the broad Morgan shoulders. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened his back. Only one question remained. "Do you think you can persuade Andrew Carnegie to sell?" he asked. "I can try," said Schwab. "If you can get him to sell, I will undertake the matter," said Morgan. So far, so good. But would Carnegie sell? How much would he demand? Schwab thought about $320 million. What would he take payment in? Common or preferred stocks? Bonds? Cash? Nobody could raise $1/3 billion in cash. There was a golf game in January on the frost-cracking heath of the St. Andrew's Links in Westchester, with Andrew bundled up in sweaters against the cold and Charlie talking volubly as usual to keep his spirits up. But no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage nearby. Then, with the same persuasiveness that had hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured out the glittering promises of retirement and comfort, of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social caprices. Carnegie capitulated, wrote a figure on a slip of paper, handed it to Schwab and said, "All right, that's what we'll sell for." The figure was approximately $400 million, and was reached by taking the $320 million mentioned by Schwab as a basic figure, and adding to it $80 million to represent the increased capital value over the previous 2 years. Later, on the deck of a transatlantic liner, the Scotsman said ruefully to Morgan, "I wish I had asked you for $100 million more." "If you had asked for it, you'd have gotten it," Morgan told him cheerfully. There was an uproar, of course. A British correspondent cabled that the foreign steel world was appalled by the gigantic combination. President Hadley of Yale declared that unless trusts were regulated, the country might expect an emperor in Washington within the next 25 years. But that able stock manipulator Keene went at his work of shoving the new stock at the public so vigorously that all the excess water, estimated by some at nearly $600 million, was absorbed in a twinkling. So Carnegie had his millions, and the Morgan Syndicate had $62 million for all its trouble, and all the boys, from Gates to Gary, had their millions. Editor's comment. The 38-year-old Charles M. Schwab had his reward, too. He was made president of the new corporation, United States Steel, and remained in control until 1930. When Schwab left U.S. Steel, he went on to found the mammoth Bethlehem Steel Corporation, of which he also became president. This is the end of the editor's comment. Riches begin with thought. The dramatic story of big business that you've just finished is a perfect illustration of the method by which desire can be transmuted into its physical equivalent. That giant organization was created in the mind of one man. The plan by which the organization was provided with the steel mills that gave it financial stability was created in the mind of the same man. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into United States Steel. The steel mills and equipment acquired by the corporation, after it had been brought into legal existence, were incidental. However, careful analysis reveals that the appraised value of the properties acquired by the corporation increased in value by an estimated $600 million, approximately $12 billion today. The increase in value of the assets is attributable to the mere transaction that consolidated them under one management. In other words, Charles M. Schwab's idea, plus the faith with which he conveyed it to the minds of J.P. Morgan and the others, was marketed for a profit of approximately $600 million. Not an insignificant sum for a single idea. The United States Steel Corporation prospered and became one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America, employing thousands of people, developing new uses for steel and opening new markets, thus proving that the $600 million in profit that the Schwab idea produced was earned. Riches begin in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitations. Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is that you ask as your price for having passed this way. Editor's comments. In the years since that article appeared in the New York World Telegram, the well-told business story has become its own genre within the publishing industry. There are best-selling books and biographies by and about the insiders who run every industry. The editors of this edition of Think and Grow Rich strongly encourage you to sample some of these books. They can be entertaining and inspirational, and in them you will be able to see examples of Hill's principles of success at work in the real world. The best of them are not only entertaining and inspirational, but they are filled with ideas and techniques you can adapt and use. There are literally too many bestsellers from which to select a best-of listing for inclusion here. Any such choice the editors might make would not necessarily be the best, but merely reflective of the interests of the person doing the choosing. However, there are two books the editors recommend that are not by or about a single individual or industry. These books are In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters and Breakthroughs by P.R. Nyack and John N. Ketteringham. Each of these books deals with a broad spectrum of industries, and within each industry they single out certain companies and individuals for analysis. Both were published at the beginning of the business book trend in the 1980s, but there are few books since then that better convey the importance of faith in a good idea. In Search of Excellence, chosen by a panel of experts as the most influential book of the past 20 years, was a runaway bestseller and will likely be in print for years to come. Breakthroughs may be harder to find, but it will be well worth the effort. This is the end of the editor's comments. A quitter never wins, and a winner never quits. Chapter 5. Autosuggestion, the medium for influencing the subconscious mind. The third step toward riches. Autosuggestion is a term that applies to all suggestions and all self-administered stimuli that reach your mind through the five senses. Stated in another way, autosuggestion is self-suggestion. It is the way of communicating between that part of the mind where conscious thought takes place and that which serves as the seat of action for the subconscious mind. Through the dominating thoughts that you permit to remain in your conscious mind, it doesn't matter whether these thoughts are negative or positive, the principle of autosuggestion reaches the subconscious mind and influences it with these thoughts. Nature has built human beings so that we can have control over the material that reaches our subconscious mind through our five senses. However, this does not mean that we always exercise this control. In the great majority of instances, we do not exercise it, which explains why so many people go through life in poverty. Recall what I said about the subconscious mind resembling a fertile garden, in which weeds will grow if the seeds of more desirable crops are not sown. Autosuggestion is the way you may feed your subconscious on creative thoughts. Or you can, by neglecting it, permit thoughts of a destructive nature to find their way into this rich garden of the mind. Editor's comments. Numerous psychological studies and experiments with hypnotherapy have validated Napoleon Hill's concept that a person's subconscious mind retains everything that person ever experienced. Studies also support the theory that the subconscious is non-judgmental. It does not filter or interpret, it simply processes information literally and stores it. For those readers who may be dubious about the subconscious, or that thoughts stored below the level of consciousness can exert enough influence to affect attitude and behavior, the following explanation should alleviate any such doubts. There is no doubt about the existence of the conditions known by the psychological terms fixations, phobias, and compulsive behaviors. These conditions occur when a child has learned something in such a powerful or dramatic way that the knowledge becomes firmly planted in the child's subconscious mind. Then, even as the child grows to adulthood and the conscious mind learns to understand that information from a mature point of view, because the childhood learning experience was so powerful, the subconscious still retains the childhood understanding of the information. The result is a fixation, phobia, or compulsive behavior that causes a response rooted in childhood, which does not make logical sense to the adult's conscious mind. That is because it does not come from the conscious. It comes from the subconscious belief that was so emotionalized it overrides the adult's logical conscious mind. Hill's theory is based on exactly the same psychological principles. Thoughts do remain stored in the subconscious. They remain just as they were when they were input, and the more highly emotionalized the thoughts are when they are input, the more influence they exert on attitude and behavior. It is this aspect of the subconscious that will allow you to use autosuggestion as a tool with which to input the positive thoughts that will help you achieve the success you desire. This is the end of the editor's comments. See and feel money in your hands. You were instructed in the last of the 6 steps described in Chapter 3 on Desire to read aloud twice daily the written statement of your desire for money. You were also directed to see and feel yourself already in possession of the money. By following these instructions, you communicate the object of your desire directly to your subconscious mind in a spirit of absolute faith. Through repetition of this procedure, you will create thought habits that reinforce your efforts to transmute desire into its monetary equivalent. Read these steps again, very carefully, before you proceed further. 1. Fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say, "I want plenty of money." Be definite about the amount. 2. Determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. There is no such reality as something for nothing. 3. Establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money you desire. 4. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at once, whether you are ready or not to put this plan into action. 5. Now write it out. Write a clear, concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire, name the time limit for its acquisition, state what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate it. 6. Read your written statement aloud twice daily. Read it once just before retiring at night, and read it once after arising in the morning. As you read, see and feel and believe yourself already in possession of the money. Remember, when reading aloud the statement of your desire, through which you will develop a money consciousness, that the mere reading of the words is of no consequence, unless you mix emotion or feeling with your words. Your subconscious mind recognizes and acts only upon thoughts that have been well mixed with emotion or feeling. This is a fact of such importance as to warrant repetition in practically every chapter. The lack of understanding of this is the main reason the majority of people who try to apply the principle of autosuggestion get no desirable results. Plain, unemotional words do not influence the subconscious mind. You will get no appreciable results until you learn to reach your subconscious mind with thoughts or spoken words that have been well emotionalized with belief. Do not become discouraged if you cannot control and direct your emotions the first time you try. Remember, there is no such possibility as something for nothing. You cannot cheat even if you desire to do so. The price of ability to influence your subconscious mind is persistence in applying the principles described here. You cannot develop the desired ability for a lower price. You, and you alone, must decide whether or not the reward, the money consciousness, is worth the price you must pay for it in effort. Your ability to use the principle of autosuggestion will depend very largely upon your capacity to concentrate on a given desire until that desire becomes a burning obsession. How to strengthen your powers of concentration. When you begin to carry out the instructions in the 6 steps, it will be necessary for you to make use of the principle of concentration. Following are suggestions for the effective use of concentration. When you begin the first of the 6 steps, which instructs you to fix in your own mind the exact amount of money you desire, close your eyes and hold your thoughts on that amount of money until you can actually see the physical appearance of the money. Do this at least once each day. As you go through these exercises, follow the instructions given in Chapter 4 on faith, and see yourself actually in possession of the money. Here is a most significant fact. The subconscious mind takes any orders given to it in a spirit of absolute faith and acts upon those orders. But the orders often have to be presented over and over again, repeated positive affirmation, before they are interpreted by the subconscious mind. Because of this, you might consider the possibility of playing a perfectly legitimate trick on your subconscious mind. Make it believe, because you believe it, that you must have the amount of money you are visualizing. Make it believe that this money is already awaiting your claim, so the subconscious mind must hand over to you practical plans for acquiring the money that is yours. Give this thought to your imagination, and see what your imagination can or will do to create practical plans for the accumulation of money through transmutation of your desire. Do not wait for a definite plan through which you will exchange services or merchandise in return for the money you are visualizing. Just start right now to see yourself in possession of the money, demanding, and expecting that your subconscious mind will hand over the plans you need. Be on the alert for these plans, and when they appear, put them into action immediately. When the plans appear, they will probably flash into your mind in the form of an inspiration or intuition from infinite intelligence. Treat it with respect and act upon it as soon as you receive it. In the 4th of the 6 steps, you are instructed to create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at once to put this plan into action. Do the same thing here. Close your eyes and create in your mind a vivid image of you carrying out the instructions. Do not trust to your reason when creating your plan for accumulating money through the transmutation of desire. Your reasoning faculty may be lazy, and if you depend entirely upon it to serve you, it may disappoint you. When visualizing the money you intend to accumulate, see yourself rendering the service or delivering the merchandise you intend to give in return for this money. This is important. Editor's comments. The basic principle underlying autosuggestion is closely related to self-hypnosis, and both techniques played an important role in the development of modern psychology. Although all three concepts, autosuggestion, hypnosis, and psychology, had to overcome initial public skepticism, unfortunately, autosuggestion and hypnotism were hampered by events that further delayed their acceptance. Hypnosis was an integral part of the therapies used by the major figures in the development of psychology, including Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and William James. It fell out of favor as a therapeutic method when stage magicians began to use the technique in their acts. People found it difficult to give serious consideration to a method that was being used in theaters and nightclubs to make members of the audience do ridiculous things for comic effect. Autosuggestion encountered a similar problem. French psychiatrist Émile Coué was the best-known early advocate of autosuggestion. A contemporary of Sigmund Freud, Coué operated a clinic that treated patients diagnosed with psychosomatic ailments, individuals who have convinced themselves they are ill and even show symptoms but do not actually have a disease. Coué treated his patients with an autosuggestion technique that involved the repetition of statements he termed positive affirmations. Coué devised a general, non-specific phrase that would give the subconscious a positive instruction, but was open enough that it did not tell the subconscious how to do it. The positive affirmation was, "Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better." And he instructed his patients to repeat the phrase several times a day. Improvements among his patients happened so quickly and dramatically that his method became the talk of medical and scientific circles, and the use of the phrase practically became a movement in Europe. Word of the success Coué was having with his method spread to America, and he was soon booked to do a lecture tour. At one of his early speaking engagements, a cynical newspaper reporter made a joke of the technique, calling it, "Hell's bells, I'm well." The joke followed Coué wherever he spoke, and the press coverage was so negative he canceled his tour and returned to practice in Europe. Serious scientists and therapists continued to work with autosuggestion. But just as had happened when stage magicians cast doubt upon the efficacy of hypnosis, Coué's method of positive affirmation fell out of favor with the general public. It took the openness of the latter part of the 20th century before the techniques of hypnosis and autosuggestion gained general acceptance once again. Today, if you go on the Internet, there are over 40,000 web links featuring positive affirmations, and numerous bestsellers have been written on the subject. Virtually every newspaper, magazine, and television news program regularly features stories on the crucial role the mind plays in personal growth and achievement. Techniques based on autosuggestion have fostered countless best-selling books, audiobooks, and video programs. And every week thousands of people attend seminars, lectures, and retreats to be inspired by motivational speakers or spiritual leaders, and to learn techniques that will help them achieve success, almost all of which are based on the basic principles Napoleon Hill advocates in this book. When Hill instructs the reader to close your eyes and hold your thoughts on that amount of money until you can actually see the physical appearance of the money, he is in fact describing the autosuggestion technique most widely taught by contemporary motivational experts. Today it is called creative visualization, and it is regularly used by some of the most successful trainers of Olympic athletes and professional sports teams. It is used by NASA in training astronauts, and medical professionals use it in a variety of ways, including teaching it to patients who need to elevate their autoimmune system. Using visualization effectively is much more than simply daydreaming about something you would like to have, or a goal you would like to achieve. Visualization is a specific technique that involves the use of imagination, creativity, vivid imagery, and affirmations, all focused on creating something you wish to manifest in reality. Napoleon Hill identified the practice of visualization and wrote about it as early as 1928 in his first bestseller, Law of Success. Since then, many other psychologists, medical professionals, motivational speakers, and authors have developed systems based on the same principles. Dr. Maxwell Maltz, a noted plastic surgeon, found that often it was as important for his patients to change their inner perception of themselves as it was to change their outer appearance. Dr. Maltz's landmark bestseller, Psycho-Cybernetics, draws heavily on visualization as a way to increase self-esteem and improve a wide range of abilities. The Silva method, which is another variation on visualization, has been taught to millions of people by certified Silva trainers who hold seminars throughout the country. Jose Silva's best-selling book, The Silva Mind Control Method, has also sold many millions of copies. In 1978, 50 years after Napoleon Hill wrote about visualization in Law of Success, Shakti Gawain published the phenomenal bestseller Creative Visualization, and Adelaide Bry published Visualization, Directing the Movies of Your Mind. At about the same time, Dr. O. Carl Simonton, an oncologist, concluded that cancer patients who used visualizations in conjunction with chemotherapy treatments had a marked improvement over those who didn't. His bestseller, Getting Well Again, had a profound impact, and it was followed by books from other respected medical professionals, such as Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel, and Superimmunity by Dr. Paul Purcell. Other bestsellers by Dr. John Sarno, Dr. Deepak Chopra, and Dr. Andrew Weil have made what once was referred to as alternative medicine now part of mainstream medical practice. This is the end of the editor's comments. Stimulate your subconscious mind. The instructions given previously for the steps necessary in your desire for money will now be summarized and blended with the principles covered by this chapter, as follows. 1. Go to some quiet spot, preferably in bed at night, where you will not be disturbed or interrupted. Close your eyes and repeat aloud, so that you may hear your own words, the written statement of the amount of money you intend to accumulate. Be specific about the time limit for its accumulation, and a description of the service or merchandise you intend to give in return for the money. As you carry out these instructions, see yourself already in possession of the money. For example, suppose that you intend to accumulate $50,000 by the 1st of January, 5 years from now, and that you intend to give your personal services as a salesperson in return for the money. Your written statement of your purpose should be similar to the following. By the 1st day of January, I will have in my possession $50,000, which will come to me in various amounts from time to time during the interim. In return for this money, I will give the most efficient service of which I am capable. I will give the fullest possible quantity and the best possible quality of service as a salesperson of, and describe the service or merchandise you intend to sell. I believe that I will have this money in my possession. My faith is so strong that I can now see this money before my eyes. I can touch it with my hands. It is now awaiting transfer to me at the time and in the proportion that I deliver the service in return for it. I am awaiting a plan for getting this money, and I will follow that plan when it is received. 2. Repeat this program night and morning until you can see in your imagination the money you intend to accumulate. 3. Place a written copy of your statement where you can see it night and morning, and read it just before retiring and upon rising until it has been memorized. Editor's comments. The following is another suggestion, adapted from Hill's later writings, which appear in Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success. Surround yourself with books, pictures, mottos, and other suggestive devices. Pick things that symbolize and reinforce achievement and self-reliance. Constantly add to your collection, and move things to new places where you can see them in a different light and in association with different things. I had a friend who was a realtor who kept her $1 Million Club certificate over her desk to remind herself of what she was capable. One day she took it down to dust and set it on top of a newspaper. When she picked it up again, she saw beneath it an article about the new football coach who had been hired at the university. Guess who bought a house she had been struggling to sell? This is the end of the editor's comments. Remember, as you carry out these instructions, that you are applying the principle of autosuggestion for the purpose of giving orders to your subconscious mind. Remember also that your subconscious mind will act only upon instructions that are emotionalized and handed over to it with feeling. Faith is the strongest and most productive of the emotions. These instructions may at first seem abstract. Do not let this disturb you. Follow the instructions no matter how abstract or impractical they may appear to be. If you do as you have been instructed, in spirit as well as in act, the time will soon come when a whole new universe of power will unfold to you. Skepticism, in connection with all new ideas, is characteristic of all human beings. If you follow the instructions, your skepticism will soon be replaced by belief, and belief will become crystallized into absolute faith. Many philosophers have made the statement that man is the master of his own earthly destiny, but most of them have failed to say why he is the master. The reason that man may become the master of himself and of his environment is because he has the power to influence his own subconscious mind. The actual performance of transmuting desire into money is through autosuggestion. That is the principle by which you can reach and influence the subconscious mind. The other principles are simply tools with which to apply autosuggestion. Keep this thought in mind, and you will at all times be conscious of the important part the principle of autosuggestion is to play in your efforts to accumulate money through the methods described in this book. After you have read the entire book, come back to this chapter and follow in spirit and in action this instruction. Read the entire chapter aloud once every night until you become thoroughly convinced that the principle of autosuggestion is sound and that it will accomplish for you all that has been claimed for it. As you read, underscore with a pencil every sentence that impresses you. Follow the foregoing instruction to the letter, and it will open the way for a complete understanding and mastery of the principles of success. Every adversity, every failure, and every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent or a greater benefit. Chapter 6. Specialized Knowledge. Personal Experiences or Observations. The fourth step toward riches. There are two kinds of knowledge. One is general, the other is specialized. General knowledge, no matter how great in quantity or variety it may be, is of little use in the accumulation of money. The faculties of the great universities possess practically every form of general knowledge known to civilization. Most of the professors have little money. They specialize in teaching knowledge, but they do not specialize in the organization or the use of knowledge. Knowledge will not attract money unless it is organized and directed through practical plans for the specific purpose of accumulating money. Lack of understanding of this fact has been the source of confusion to millions of people who falsely believe that knowledge is power. It is nothing of the sort. Knowledge is only potential power. It becomes power only when and if it is organized into definite plans of action and directed to a definite end. The missing link in all systems of education is that educational institutions fail to teach their students how to organize and use the knowledge after they have acquired it. Many people made the mistake of assuming that because Henry Ford had little schooling, he was not a man of education. Those who made this mistake did not understand the real meaning of the word educate. That word is derived from the Latin word educo, meaning to educe, to draw out, or to develop from within. An educated person is not necessarily one who has an abundance of general or specialized knowledge. An educated person is one who has so developed the faculties of their mind that he or she may acquire anything they want, or its equivalent, without violating the rights of others. During the World War, a Chicago newspaper published editorials in which, among other statements, Henry Ford was called an ignorant pacifist. Mr. Ford objected to the statements and sued the paper for libeling him. When the suit was tried in the courts, the attorneys for the paper called Mr. Ford to the witness stand for the purpose of proving to the jury that he was ignorant. They asked Mr. Ford a great variety of questions. All of them intended to prove that while he might possess considerable specialized knowledge about manufacturing automobiles, he was in the main ignorant. Mr. Ford was asked such questions as, who was Benedict Arnold, and how many soldiers did the British send over to America to put down the rebellion of 1776? In answer to the last question, Mr. Ford replied, I do not know the exact number of soldiers the British sent over, but I have heard that it was a considerably larger number than ever went back. Finally, Mr. Ford became tired of this line of questioning. In reply to a particularly offensive question, he leaned over, pointed his finger at the lawyer who had asked the question, and said, If I should really want to answer the foolish question you have just asked, or any of the other questions you have been asking me, let me remind you that I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk, and by pushing the right button I can summon to my aid men who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business to which I am devoting most of my efforts. Now, will you kindly tell me why I should clutter up my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions when I have men around me who can supply any knowledge I require? That answer floored the lawyer. Every person in the courtroom realized it was the answer not of an ignorant man, but of a man of education. Any person is educated who knows where to get knowledge when they need it and how to organize that knowledge into definite plans of action. Through the assistance of his mastermind group, Henry Ford had at his command all the specialized knowledge he needed to become one of the wealthiest men in America. It was not essential that he have this knowledge in his own mind. You can get all the knowledge you need. Before you can transmute your desire into money, you will require specialized knowledge of the service, merchandise, or profession that you intend to offer in return for fortune. Perhaps you may need much more specialized knowledge than you have the ability or the inclination to acquire. If this is true, you may bridge your weakness through the aid of your mastermind group. The mastermind is defined as coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. The larger meaning of the mastermind group is explained in greater detail in later chapters. Editor's comments. After reading Hill's definition of the mastermind, many people may assume that he is describing teamwork. That would not be correct. The following explanation is adapted from the Napoleon Hill Foundation's book, Believe and Achieve. Teamwork can be achieved by any group, even one whose members have disparate interests, because all it requires is cooperation. In teamwork, people might simply be cooperating because they like the leader or out of a sense of duty. Some team members will give 100% to any team that pays them enough, but they have little concern about the objective. And sometimes there is good teamwork because different members have different agendas. A board of directors may disagree, even be unfriendly, and still run a business successfully. Musical groups are made up of notoriously self-centered people who work as a team if it will help them get ahead. Masterminds, on the other hand, are formed of individuals who have the same agenda, a deep sense of mission, and commitment to the same goal. Masterminds represent the highest order of thinking by a group of knowledgeable people, each contributing their absolute best according to their abilities, expertise, and background. If you have ever been a part of a meeting when everything just clicked and ideas built upon other ideas, with each member contributing until out of the group activity came the best possible idea or solution, that was a mastermind at work. Napoleon Hill believed that you must make the mastermind experience a regular part of your life if you really want to succeed. How to select the right people for your mastermind will be discussed further in Chapter 11, The Power of the Mastermind. This is the end of the editor's comment. The accumulation of great fortunes calls for power, and power is acquired through highly organized and intelligently directed specialized knowledge. That knowledge does not, necessarily, have to be in the possession of the person who accumulates the fortune. This should give hope and encouragement to those who want to accumulate a fortune, but don't have the necessary education to supply such specialized knowledge. People sometimes go through life suffering from inferiority complexes because they are not people of education. The person who can organize and direct a mastermind group of people who possess the knowledge needed is just as much a person of education as any other individual in the group. Thomas A. Edison had only 3 months of schooling during his entire life, but he did not lack education. Neither did he die poor. Henry Ford had less than a 6th grade schooling, but he managed to do pretty well by himself financially. Albert Einstein was working as a clerk in a patent office when he began to develop his world-altering scientific theories. Editor's comments. Had Einstein been born today, he might have been diagnosed in his early years as having attention deficit disorder. As a child, he was slow to learn to talk. As a student, he showed little promise and was expelled from at least one school. But what Einstein could do was to focus his concentration on a goal of his choice. His famous theories were the result of thought experiments that took place inside his mind. It is said that the breakthrough which led him to the theory of relativity came not from specialized knowledge of physics or mathematics, but from his ability to imagine what would happen if he were riding on a beam of starlight through space. This is the end of the editor's comments. Specialized knowledge is among the most plentiful and the cheapest forms of service that may be had. If you doubt this, consult the payroll of any university. It pays to know how to purchase knowledge, and it pays to know where to look. First of all, decide the sort of specialized knowledge you require and the purpose for which it is needed. To a large extent, your major purpose in life, the goal toward which you are working, will help determine what knowledge you need. Your next move requires that you have accurate information concerning dependable sources of knowledge. The more important of these are your own experience and education, experience and education available through cooperation of others, mastermind alliance, colleges and universities, public libraries, and even easier, the Internet, special training courses through night schools and home study courses in particular. As knowledge is acquired, it must be organized and put into use for a definite purpose through practical plans. Knowledge has no value except for what can be gained from its application toward some worthy end. Successful people never stop acquiring specialized knowledge related to their major purpose, business, or profession. Those who are not successful usually make the mistake of believing that the knowledge-acquiring period ends when you finish school. The truth is that schools do little more than teach you how to acquire practical knowledge. Editor's comments. At this point in the original edition of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill included a newspaper story about education and job opportunities. Although the contemporary job market has changed considerably, the author of the article, Robert Moore, Director of Placements at Columbia University, made some comments that are perfectly aligned with the philosophy of Think and Grow Rich and are still holding true today. One such comment was, "The man who has been active on the campus, whose personality is such that he gets along with all kinds of people, and who has done an adequate job with his studies, has a most decided edge over the strictly academic student." One of the largest industrial companies, the leader in its field, in writing to Mr. Moore concerning prospective seniors at the college said, "We emphasize qualities of character, intelligence, and personality far more than specific educational background. Although few would argue that education is valuable, as Moore implies above and as Hill noted earlier about Edison, Ford, and Einstein, academic accomplishment has never been a sure indicator of success. The October 27, 2003 issue of Time magazine made a similar point in their cover story about the changes being made in the SAT exam. Although the article's primary focus is on the efforts to make the SAT less biased, it also notes that recent research indicates that neither the SAT nor IQ tests have proven to be very reliable predictors of future real-world achievement. In his best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence, author Daniel Goleman has created a persuasive argument that the way in which a person handles themselves and their relationships, which he calls emotional intelligence, or EI, is a much better indicator than IQ in predicting whether a person will be successful in life. In his later books, Working with Emotional Intelligence and Primal Leadership, Goleman applies his theory to the workplace, focusing on emotional intelligence leadership techniques and comparing corporate managers' EI with their IQ to analyze which has the greatest positive effect on the financial bottom line. Daniel Goleman's theories have caused some significant changes within educational circles and among management theorists, but their greatest impact has been on individuals who have gone through life intimidated because they believe they aren't smart enough. For them, Goleman's books offer convincing evidence that although they may not have conventional education, their natural abilities and interpersonal skills can be far more important in achieving success. This is the end of the editor's comments. One of the most reliable and practical sources of knowledge available to those who need specialized schooling are night schools, extension courses, and seminars. The correspondence schools give specialized training anywhere the U.S. mails go, or via the Internet. One advantage of home study training is the flexibility of the study program, which permits you to study during spare time. Another advantage of home study training, if the school is carefully chosen, is that most courses offer some method of personal consultation, which can be of priceless value to those needing specialized knowledge. No matter where you live, you can share the benefits. A lesson from a collection agency. Anything acquired without effort and without cost is generally unappreciated and often discredited. Perhaps this is why we get so little from our marvelous opportunity in public schools. The self-discipline you will learn from a program of specialized study can make up for the wasted opportunity when knowledge was available without cost. Being asked to pay, whether you make good grades or poor, has the effect of causing you to follow through with a course when you would otherwise drop it. I learned this from experience when I enrolled for a home study course in advertising. After completing 8 or 10 lessons, I stopped studying. But the school did not stop sending me bills. In fact, they insisted upon payment, whether I kept up my studies or not. I decided that if I had to pay for the course, which I had legally obligated myself to do, I should complete the lessons and get my money's worth. Correspondence schools are well-organized businesses. At the time, I felt that their collection system was somewhat too well organized, but I learned later in life that it was a valuable part of my education. The truth is that their collection department constituted the very finest sort of training on decision-making, promptness, and the habit of finishing what you begin. The collection system that forced me to finish the course turned out to be worth much in the form of money earned. The road to specialized knowledge. We have in this country what is said to be the greatest public school system in the world. One of the strange things about human beings is that they value only that which has a price. The free schools of America and the free public libraries do not impress people because they are free. This is the major reason why so many people find it necessary to acquire additional training after they finish school and go to work. It is also one of the major reasons why employers give greater consideration to employees who take specialized training courses. They have learned that those who have the ambition to give up a part of their spare time to studying at home have in them those qualities that make for leadership. There is one weakness in people for which there is no remedy. It is the universal weakness of lack of ambition. People who give up some of their spare time to take courses seldom remain at the bottom very long. By taking such courses, they open the way for the upward climb, remove many obstacles from their path, and attract the interest of those who have the power to help them. The home study method of training is especially suited to people who have already started working. They often find that after having left school, they still need additional specialized knowledge, but cannot spare the time to go back to school. Stuart Austin Weir was a construction engineer. He followed this line of work until the Depression hit and severely limited the construction business. He took inventory of himself and decided to change his profession to law. He went back to school and took special courses to prepare himself as a corporation lawyer. He completed his training, passed the bar examination, and quickly built a lucrative law practice as a patent attorney. Just to keep the record straight, and to anticipate the excuses of those who will say, "I couldn't go to school because I have a family to support," or "I'm too old," I will add that Mr. Weir was past 40 and married when he went back to school. Moreover, by carefully selecting highly specialized courses, Mr. Weir completed in 2 years the work that it takes the majority of law students 4 years to do. It pays to know how to purchase knowledge. A simple idea that paid off. Here's another specific example about a salesman in a grocery store who found himself suddenly unemployed. Having had some bookkeeping experience, he took a special course in accounting, familiarized himself with all the latest bookkeeping and office equipment, and went into business for himself. Starting with a grocer for whom he had formerly worked, he made contracts with more than 100 small merchants to keep their books at a very nominal monthly fee. His idea was so practical that he soon found it necessary to set up a portable accounting office in a light delivery truck. He now has a fleet of these bookkeeping offices on wheels. He employs a large staff of assistants who provide small merchants with accounting services equal to the best that money can buy at very nominal cost. Specialized knowledge plus imagination were the ingredients that went into this unique and successful business. Last year, the owner of that business paid income taxes of almost 10 times as much as was paid by the grocery store that fired him. Editor's comments. It would be impossible to write a contemporary book about success without including the story of Bill Gates. And although the connection between the world's wealthiest man and Hill's story about a man who started a mobile accounting business may not be immediately obvious, the fact is that this is a very apt place to include the story of Microsoft. Just as with the mobile accountant, the two defining characteristics of Bill Gates' success are specialized knowledge and imagination. Everyone had recognized at an early age that Bill Gates was a very bright student, but he had little interest in anything other than science and math. And when the mothers group at his school arranged for the students to learn about computing, that became his passion. By the time he was 13, he taught himself computer programming, and throughout high school and his years at university, his life revolved around computer clubs and odd jobs working for companies that had something to do with computers. Although at various times he toyed with the idea of a career in science or law, it is probably fair to say that while he was still in school, Bill Gates knew, in general terms, what his burning desire in life would be. He paid little attention to general knowledge, but devoted himself to assembling the specialized knowledge he would need to achieve his definite major purpose. Gates' burning desire heated up the day his friend and fellow computer club member Paul Allen bought a copy of the January 1975 issue of Popular Electronics. On the cover was a picture of an inexpensive desktop computer, the Altair 8800, which could be built from a kit. Gates and Allen knew in their gut that there were other students just like them who would love to get their hands on one of these things. At the time, it took a lot of imagination to foresee the impact computers might have on the average person. And even though they didn't own an Altair, they decided they could write a computer program for it. That took even more imagination. They contacted Ed Roberts, the founder of the company that made the Altair, and pitched their idea. Roberts told them he was getting offers from all over, and his policy was that whoever wrote it first would get the job. For the next 2 months, they tore apart the manual, gleaning the specialized knowledge they would need to write the program. They were the first to deliver a workable operating system, and Roberts bought it from them for $3,000 plus a royalty on sales. With their vision of the future burning in their imaginations, Gates and Allen used the advance and their royalties to launch a company that would be in the business of writing computer programs. They named their new company Microsoft and called old friends from their high school computer club to staff it. Bill Gates was 19 and Paul Allen was only a few years older. They and about 9 of their friends started writing programs for Apple Computer, Commodore, and anyone else who would contract with the company for their services. For the next 5 years, Bill Gates and Paul Allen had their share of imaginative ideas, but mostly they concentrated on learning the specialized knowledge needed to run and grow a successful business. Then in 1980, IBM, which had finally decided to get into the small computer business, needed help getting up to speed. They approached Microsoft to write an operating system for the new computer venture. Once again, specialized knowledge and imagination were the qualities that guided Bill Gates. In their imagination, Gates and Allen could see an even bigger future than before, and through specialized knowledge of what computers were capable of, they knew the role they could play in that future. They then made 2 business moves that are the foundation of the Microsoft success. First, because IBM had such a tight schedule, Gates went to a computer programmer, Tim Patterson, and bought from him a rudimentary but already developed operating system. Gates then set to work modifying the system, and he renamed it MS-DOS, for Microsoft Disk Operating System. The other move that was crucial to their success was the negotiation with IBM. They started from the position that they would not sell an operating system to IBM. What they would do was license the system to IBM in exchange for a royalty on every copy sold with an IBM computer. And it would not be an exclusive license, which meant that Microsoft could also license the system to other computer companies. If you were to continue to track the history of Microsoft, you would find those same qualities: a burning desire, an idea, specialized knowledge, and imagination behind each move Bill Gates made and continues to make, just as they were behind the success of the man who started the mobile accounting business. This is the end of the editor's comments. The beginning of the successful mobile accounting business was an idea. I know this is true because I was the one who gave him that idea. Now I'd like to pass on the story of another idea. And it was my accountant friend who indirectly suggested this one to me. When I first proposed the accounting idea to him, he said, "I like the idea, but I would not know how to turn it into cash." In other words, he did not know how to market his bookkeeping knowledge after he had acquired it. So, with the aid of a young woman copywriter, a very attractive presentation was prepared describing the advantages of the new system of bookkeeping. The brochure told the story of this new business so effectively that its owner soon had more accounts than he could handle. There are thousands of people all over the country who need the services of a merchandising specialist capable of preparing an attractive way to market personal services. This idea was born of the necessity to solve a specific problem. But it did not stop by serving merely one person. The woman who created the presentation has a keen imagination. She saw in her newly born brainchild the making of a new profession to serve thousands of people who need practical guidance in marketing personal services. Spurred to action by the success of her first prepared plan to market personal services, this woman turned to solving a similar problem for her son. He had just finished college, but had been totally unable to find a market for his services. The plan she created for him was the best example of merchandising personal services I have ever seen. When the presentation had been completed, it contained nearly 50 pages of beautifully typed, properly organized information. It told the story of her son's natural abilities, schooling, personal experiences, and a great variety of other information. The book also contained a complete description of the position her son desired, together with a marvelous word picture of the exact plan he would use in filling his position. The preparation of the presentation required several weeks of her time, during which she sent her son to the public library almost daily to get specific data needed to sell his services to best advantage. She also sent him to all the competitors of his prospective employer, where he gathered information concerning their business methods. This was of great value in the formation of the plan he intended to use in filling the position he sought. When the plan was finished, it contained more than half a dozen very fine suggestions that would benefit the prospective employer. You don't have to start at the bottom. You may be inclined to ask, why go to all this trouble to secure a job? The answer is, doing a thing well is never trouble. The plan prepared by this woman for her son helped him get the job at the first interview and at a salary fixed by himself. Moreover, and this too is important, the position did not require the young man to start at the bottom. He began as a junior executive at an executive salary. Why go to all this trouble? Well, for one thing, this young man's planned presentation saved him no less than 10 years of working his way up. The idea of starting at the bottom and working your way up may appear to be sound, but the major objection to it is this. Too many of those who begin at the bottom never manage to lift their heads high enough to be seen by those who count. And the outlook from the bottom is not very bright or encouraging. It has a tendency to kill off ambition. You get into a rut, and you accept your fate because you form the habit of daily routine. Often this habit finally becomes so strong you don't even try to throw it off. And that is another reason why it pays to start 1 or 2 steps above the bottom. By so doing, you will form the habit of looking around, of observing how others get ahead, of seeing opportunity, and of embracing it without hesitation. A splendid example of what I mean is Dan Halpin. During his college days, he was manager of the famous 1930 championship Notre Dame football team, when it was under the direction of the late Knute Rockne. Halpin finished college at a very unfavorable time. The Depression had made jobs scarce. So after a fling at investment banking and motion pictures, he took the first job with a potential future he could find. It was selling electrical hearing aids on a commission basis. Anyone could start in that sort of job, and Halpin knew it, but it was enough to open the door of opportunity to him. For almost 2 years he worked at the job, but it didn't satisfy him. He would never have risen above that job if he had not done something about his dissatisfaction. He aimed first at the job of assistant sales manager of the company, and he got the job. That single step upward placed him high enough above the crowd for him to see still greater opportunity. Also, it placed him where opportunity could see him. In his new position, he did so well selling hearing aids that A.M. Andrews, chairman of the board of the Dictograph Products Company, a competitor of the company for which Halpin worked, asked to meet with him. Mr. Andrews wanted to know something about that man Dan Halpin, who was taking big sales away from the long-established Dictograph Company. When the interview was over, Halpin was the new sales manager in charge of the Acousticon division of Dictograph. Then, to test young Halpin's mettle, Mr. Andrews went away to Florida for 3 months, leaving him to sink or swim in his new job. He did not sink. Knute Rockne's spirit of all the world loves a winner and has no time for a loser inspired him to put so much into his job that he was elected vice president of the company. Vice president was a job that most would be proud to earn through 10 years of loyal effort, but Halpin turned the trick in little more than 6 months. One of the major points I'm trying to emphasize through this entire philosophy is that we rise to high positions or remain at the bottom because of conditions we can control, but only if we desire to control them. I am also trying to emphasize another point, that both success and failure are largely the results of habit. I have not the slightest doubt that Dan Halpin's close association with the greatest football coach America ever knew planted in his mind the same kind of desire to excel that made the Notre Dame football team world famous. Truly, there's something to the idea that hero worship is helpful, provided you worship a winner. My belief in the theory that business associations are vital factors, both in failure and in success, was clearly demonstrated when my son Blair was negotiating with Dan Halpin for a position. Mr. Halpin offered him a beginning salary of about one-half what he could have gotten from a rival company. I brought parental pressure to bear, and encouraged Blair to accept the job with Mr. Halpin. I believe that close association with people who refuse to compromise with circumstances is an asset that can never be measured in terms of money. The bottom is a monotonous, dreary, unprofitable place for any person. That is why I have taken the time to describe how lowly beginnings can be overcome by proper planning. Make your ideas pay off through specialized knowledge. The woman who prepared the personal service sales plan for her son now receives requests from all parts of the country, from others who want to market their personal services for more money. But don't think that all her plan consists of is clever salesmanship to help her clients get more money for the same services they formerly sold for less. She looks after the interests of the purchaser as well as the seller of personal services. She prepares her plans so that the employers receive full value for the additional money they pay. If you have the imagination and seek a more profitable outlet for your personal services, this suggestion may be the stimulus for which you have been searching. The idea could earn you an income far greater than that of the average doctor, lawyer, or engineer whose education required several years in college. Editor's comments. Mary Kay Ash was literally researching and writing down specialized knowledge when the idea for a new business was born in her imagination. Mary Kay had quit her job as a very successful sales manager in the gift business because she had become discouraged by seeing the men she had trained earning more and being promoted ahead of her. She decided to write an advice book for career women, but as she assembled the knowledge women would need to get ahead, she realized she was writing a business plan for the kind of business she would like to run. She took her life savings of $5,000, went out and found a skincare cream she liked, acquired the rights to it, and began to contact her friends and friends of friends to see if they would like to be beauty consultants for her new company. But what she was offering wasn't just a chance to sell skincare products. It was a very imaginative combination of philosophy and opportunity that gave women the chance to achieve both personal satisfaction and financial success. The company showed a modest profit in its first year, and continued to grow each year until, by the beginning of the 21st century, there were over 1 million independent beauty consultants in 30 countries with wholesale sales of more than $1.5 billion. 3 times Mary Kay Cosmetics was named as one of the 100 best companies to work for in America, and Lifetime Television Network named Mary Kay the businesswoman of the century. She became one of the most in-demand motivational speakers and the best-selling author of 3 books. Neil Balter also started his company based on specialized knowledge and imagination. He got his specialized knowledge from his job as a carpenter's apprentice. His imagination came into play the day he was hired by a customer who wanted to clear up a messy closet by having shelves installed. Now that kind of job must have been offered to thousands of carpenters, but not one of them had the imagination to see in it what Neil Balter saw. When he finished the work, Balter didn't just see nicely fitted shelves. He saw that he had created a solution for a problem that was common to every household in America. He took the money he earned from the job and started his own business, California Closet Company, which specialized in shelves and fittings designed to attractively organize closet space for maximum efficiency. But Balter's imagination didn't stop once he had his own business up and running. Now he could imagine an even bigger operation. So he went out to find new specialized knowledge about operating and franchising a business. Neil Balter had licensed more than 100 California Closet franchises when Williams-Sonoma offered to buy the company for $12 million. Lillian Vernon's specialized knowledge was in an area that many women had, but they didn't have the imagination she had. To quote from her autobiography, An Eye for Winners, "Handbags. I knew about those, why not sell them? And belts to match. Didn't every teenage girl strolling along the street anywhere in the United States sport a handbag and belt? And my handbags would offer something special. Each one would be personalized with initials. I knew with absolute certainty that teenagers would go for items that made them feel unique." She believed enough in her idea that she spent $495 to take a small ad in 17 magazine. The ad brought in $32,000 in orders. That was when Lillian Vernon started to gather other specialized knowledge about renting space, manufacturing products, warehousing, and shipping, all of which she'd need to grow her idea of bags and belts into a direct response business featuring a whole array of distinctively monogrammed items. Within a few years, she needed more specialized knowledge about product photography, layout, printing, and direct mail, as she imagined having her own catalog. She started by mailing a 16-page black-and-white catalog to 125,000 customers who had bought products from her in the past. At the beginning of the 21st century, Lillian Vernon was still picking the merchandise and overseeing the design of her catalogs, many of which now run well over 100 full-color pages, are mailed to millions of people many times each year, and generate approximately $250 million in annual sales. There is another story about gathering specialized knowledge that is so good we will use it to conclude this editorial comment. It actually comes from the Napoleon Hill archives, and although he did not include it in Think and Grow Rich, he often used it as an example in his lectures and seminars. There was a young man who started out working for the railroad in 1893 as a machinist at 5 cents an hour. He was always taking courses and learning what he could about steam engines, and by 1905 he had worked his way up through the ranks until he was superintendent of motive power for Chicago Great Western in Olwine, Iowa. Then he did something that must have made his friends think he had taken leave of his senses. He was attending the Chicago Automobile Show when a red and white locomobile caught his attention. He put up his life savings of $700 and convinced a friend to co-sign a loan for $4,300 so he could buy the car. He promptly took it home, put it into a shed, jacked it up, and proceeded to take it apart piece by piece. Then he put it back together again. Then he took it apart and put it back together again. After doing that a few more times, he had learned what he wanted to know. And that was how Walter P. Chrysler gathered the specialized knowledge he needed to get himself out of railroading and into the automobile business. This is the end of the editor's comment. There is no fixed price for sound ideas. Behind all ideas is specialized knowledge. But remember, specialized knowledge is more abundant and more easily acquired than ideas. Because of this truth, there are ever-increasing opportunities for the person capable of helping men and women sell their personal services. Capability means imagination, the one quality needed to combine specialized knowledge with ideas to create organized plans that will yield riches. If you have imagination, this chapter may present you with an idea that is the beginning of the riches you desire. Remember, the idea is the main thing. Specialized knowledge may be found just around the corner. Any corner. Happiness is found in doing, not merely in possessing. Chapter 7. Imagination, the workshop of the mind. The fifth step toward riches. The imagination is literally the workshop where all plans are created. It is where the impulse, the desire, is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imaginative faculty of the mind. It has been said that we can create anything that we can imagine. Through the aid of imagination, we have discovered and harnessed more of nature's forces during the past 50 years than during the entire history of the human race previous to that time. And even with all we have accomplished, we have come nowhere near the limit of what we are capable. Our only limitation, within reason, lies in the development and use of our imagination. The human imagination offers so much possibility, it is as though we have merely discovered that we have an imagination, and have just started to use it in a very elementary way. Two forms of imagination. The imaginative faculty functions in two forms. One is known as synthetic imagination, and the other as creative imagination. Editor's comments. In modern usage, the word synthetic has taken on a negative connotation, implying that something is artificial, not the real thing. Today the word synthesized, which is defined as something made up from component parts, would better describe what Hill had in mind, and has been substituted here accordingly. This is the end of the editor's comment. Synthesized imagination. Through this faculty, you arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. Synthesized imagination does not create anything. It merely works with the material of experience, education, and observation with which it is fed. It is the faculty used by most inventors, with the exception of those geniuses who draw upon the creative imagination when they cannot solve problems through synthesized imagination. Creative imagination. Through the faculty of creative imagination, the finite human mind has direct communication with infinite intelligence, the faculty through which hunches and inspirations are received. It is by this faculty that all basic or new ideas are handed over to mankind. It is through this faculty that we pick up vibes from other people, and in that way one individual may tune in or communicate with the subconscious minds of others. This concept is explained in greater detail later. The creative imagination works automatically, but only when your conscious mind is motivated, energized, and working at such a high rate that it becomes very perceptive and receptive, such as when the conscious mind is stimulated through the emotion of a strong desire. The great leaders of business, industry, and finance, and the great artists, musicians, poets, and writers became great because they developed the faculty of creative imagination. Editor's comment. At this point, it should be noted that both kinds of imagination are equally valuable to you, and they work together so seamlessly it is often hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. For instance, when Jeff Bezos created the idea of Amazon.com, was it synthesized imagination or creative imagination? At the time, many people were getting onto the idea of the Internet as a sales medium. From this, it could be concluded that he was drawing upon experience, education, and observation, which would mean he was using synthesized imagination. But why did he decide to sell books? Was that synthesized or creative? Did that idea come out of something in his subconscious that just felt like books were the right thing? And what about that name? Calling a bookstore Amazon didn't make sense to anyone but Bezos, but it certainly caught the public's attention. How important was the name in the store's success? Was that choice creative or synthesized? Now take it a step further. What about eBay? Amazon had already shown that you could sell a lot of goods on the Internet. When Pierre Omidyar hit on the idea of selling things on the Internet by turning it into an auction house, what part was synthesized and what part was creative? The answer is, it doesn't matter. Whether you are consciously assembling the parts of a plan, or if subconsciously the pieces fall into place and suddenly hit you in a flash of inspiration, all that matters is that you are putting your imagination to work. And the more you use it, the better both the synthesized and the creative will work for you. This is the end of the editor's comment. Desire is a thought, an impulse. It is nebulous and ephemeral. It is abstract and of no value until it has been transformed into its physical counterpart. While the synthesized imagination is the one that will be used most frequently in the process of transforming desire into money, There will be circumstances and situations that demand the use of the creative imagination as well. Both the synthesized and the creative imagination become more alert and receptive with use. And though your imaginative faculty may have become weak through lack of use, you can revive it. Just as any muscle or organ of the body develops the more it is used, your imagination also becomes more receptive in direct response to the amount that you use it. Use your synthesized imagination. First, let us focus attention on the development of the synthesized imagination. This is the faculty that you will use more often in converting desire into money. Transformation of the intangible impulse of desire into the tangible reality of money calls for the use of a plan or plans. To make plans, you must use your imagination. Mainly, this will require you to use your synthesized imagination as you draw upon your experience, your education, and your observations. Editor's comment. The following is adapted from Hill's later writing and appears in Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success. An excellent example of synthesized imagination is Edison's invention of the light bulb. He began with one recognized fact that other people had discovered. A wire could be heated by electricity until it produced light. The problem was that the intense heat quickly burned the wire out, and the light never lasted more than a few minutes. Edison failed more than 10,000 times in his attempt to control this heat. When he found the method, it was by applying another common fact that had simply eluded everyone else. He realized that charcoal is produced by setting wood on fire, covering it with soil, and allowing the fires to smolder. The soil permits only enough air to reach the fire to keep it burning without blazing, and that way the wood isn't burned up. When Edison recognized this fact, his imagination immediately associated it with the idea of heating the wire. He placed the wire inside a bottle, pumped out most of the air, and produced the first incandescent light. It burned for 8.5 hours. Everything that Edison used to make the electric light was widely known, but the way he synthesized the knowledge changed the world and made him a very wealthy man. W. Clement Stone called the process the R2A2 formula: recognize and relate, assimilate and apply. If you do that with everything you see, hear, think, and experience, it will give you a new way of looking at familiar things. If you do that, you can achieve what others believe is impossible. Later in this chapter, you will read of other fortunes that grew from even simpler synthesized ideas, and these stories should lead you to conclude that the combination of ideas is nothing that you couldn't have thought of yourself. That alone should start your own imagination synthesizing ideas. However, even though these stories will inspire you, and you will be anxious to get started, this is not yet the point for you to start making plans. Here, and throughout Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill reminds the reader that this book is meant to be read all the way through before beginning to put the philosophy into practice. There are other ideas to be assimilated from later chapters that will influence your imagination and therefore affect the plans you may develop. This is the end of the editor's comments. Read the entire book through. Then come back to this chapter and begin to put your imagination to work on the building of a plan for transforming your desire into money. Examples and instructions for creating plans are given in almost every chapter. Carry out the instructions that are best suited to your needs and put your plan in writing. The moment you complete this, you will have definitely given concrete form to your intangible desire. Now, read that sentence once more in a slightly different way. The moment I put my plan in writing, I will have definitely given concrete form to my desire. Now read it aloud and realize what you are telling yourself. Desire is only a thought. Through synthesized imagination, your experience, education, and observations will give it shape, form, and action. From the moment you follow those instructions and write out your desire and your plan, you will have actually taken the first of a series of steps that will enable you to convert the thought into its physical counterpart. Editor's comments. Synthesized imagination plays a role in every phase of a business plan. In fact, some of the most successful companies actually get started from synthesized imagination. When an entrepreneur, drawing upon his or her education, experience, and observations, takes an idea from one source and gives it a new application. That is exactly what happened with Ruth Handler. She and her husband, along with another partner, had started a small manufacturing company which had evolved into toy manufacturing. The success of their business depended on coming up with new toy ideas. Watching her young daughter at play, Ruth Handler noticed that she was fascinated with cutout books that featured teenage girl or career women paper dolls that she could cut out clothes for. She also knew that little girls loved to play dress-up in grown-up clothes. These ideas, drawn from Ruth Handler's education, experience, and observations, synthesized themselves in her imagination and came together as a new idea. Ruth Handler announced that they should make a lifelike teenage girl doll. Not a paper doll, but a real three-dimensional grown-up doll with a woman's figure, and they could also make grown-up clothes to fit it, so that girls could play dress-up with the doll. In honor of the source of inspiration, Ruth Handler named the new doll after her daughter, Barbie. As obvious as it seems now, until Ruth Handler, no one had the imagination to make and market a doll that looked like a woman, and certainly no one had ever made endless collections of tiny women's fashions for a doll to wear. Previously, we mentioned Jeff Bezos creating Amazon by combining the idea of a bookstore with the Internet, and Pierre Omidyar doing the same thing with auctions when he launched eBay. Mary Kay Ash took the idea of women running their own businesses and added the idea of door-to-door sales. Anita Roddick took the trend of all-natural ingredients, combined it with cosmetics, and created the body shop empire. Bernard Marcus and Arthur Blank took the concept of the supermarket, combined it with hardware, and created Home Depot. Thomas Stemberg and Leo Kahn did the same thing with office supplies and launched Staples. Once the connections are made, it may seem obvious, but making these supposedly obvious connections has brought success to many people. Napoleon Hill says imagination is like a muscle that can be strengthened through use. Just as there are specific exercises that will build and improve physical muscles, specific exercises have been developed to improve and build imagination, and it is commonly accepted that creativity developed in one area will affect your creativity in others. Dr. Edward de Bono, one of the most highly regarded experts in the field, has written more than 25 books, including the bestsellers Lateral Thinking and 6 Thinking Hats, that are literally designed to make you think. Dr. Betty Edwards' bestseller, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, uses drawing techniques to awaken creativity. Dr. Gabrielle Rico's bestseller, Writing the Natural Way, uses a technique called clustering as a way to break writer's block. And Tony Buzan uses a similar method for opening your mind that he terms mind mapping. In their bestseller, Super Learning, Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder show ways to use classical music, and Roger Von Eck suggests puzzles and riddles as stimuli in A Whack on the Side of the Head. This is the end of the editor's comments. Tapping into creative imagination. The earth on which you live, you yourself, and every other material thing are the result of evolutionary change, through which bits of matter have been organized and arranged in an orderly fashion. As far as science has been able to determine, the entire universe consists of but 2 things, matter and energy. Moreover, and this statement is of stupendous importance, this earth, every one of the billions of individual cells of your body, and every subatomic particle of matter began as an intangible form of energy. Through the combination of energy and matter has been created everything perceptible, from the largest star in the heavens down to and including man himself. Desire is a thought impulse. Thought impulses are forms of energy. When you begin the process of acquiring money by using the thought impulse of desire, you are drafting into your service the same stuff that nature used in creating this earth, as well as every material form in the universe, including your body and your brain, in which the thought impulses function. Editor's comments. Although recent developments in physics, gauge theory, string theory, membrane theory, and others, have advanced our understanding of matter and energy, Hill's preceding description remains in accord with modern science. The newer theories are variations on and refinements of the basic concept that everything in the universe is either space, time, matter, or energy. And as Einstein stated, energy and matter are in fact different forms of the same thing. As Hill says, everything from the stars to the solar system to the earth, to you, your brain, and that little spark called a thought, are all the same stuff. As when a tablecloth is spread out, there are folds and bumps in the fabric that are all different from each other, but they are all still tablecloth. Like the folds and bumps in the tablecloth, energy and matter are the same thing in different forms. Therefore you, matter, your thoughts, energy, and everybody else, matter, and their thoughts, energy, and all other things, matter, are not just interconnected, but are in essence all the same thing. Hill calls this interrelation of everything to everything else infinite intelligence. In the chapter on faith, he made his first mention of infinite intelligence being the source of hunches, intuition, and flashes of inspiration. In the chapter on autosuggestion, he proposed that the subconscious mind is the connection with infinite intelligence. In this chapter, Hill elaborates that creative imagination is the receiver through which these flashes of insight come to us from infinite intelligence. Under some circumstances, when your mind is operating at a high rate, your creative intelligence receives not just an idea, but also a flash of intuition. You get a hunch or a premonition about something or somebody. That flash could not come from your conscious or your subconscious, because neither ever had the information. Because everything is a part of everything else, your creative imagination, energy, pulled the thought, energy, directly from the common pool of infinite intelligence, energy, that contains not just your subconscious, energy, but all other subconscious minds, energy, as well. Infinite intelligence is a complex concept, and for those readers who find themselves questioning the process, be assured that Hill expands on the theory in later chapters. The editors advise the reader to set aside any questions for the moment and focus on the logical and practical application Hill had in mind. This is the end of the editor's comments. You are engaged in trying to turn your desire into its physical or monetary counterpart, and there are laws of physics and principles of psychology that can help you. But first, you must give yourself time to become familiar with these laws and learn to use them. Through repetition, and by describing these principles from every conceivable angle, I hope to reveal to you the secret through which every great fortune has been accumulated. Strange and paradoxical as it may seem, the secret is not a secret. It is made obvious in the earth, the stars, the planets, in the elements above and around us, in every blade of grass, and every form of life within our vision. Do not be discouraged if you do not fully understand or accept this theory. I do not expect that you will accept all that is in this chapter on your first reading. Assimilate as much as you can now as you read this for the first time. Later, when you reread and study it, you will discover that something has happened to clarify it and give you a broader understanding of the whole. Above all, do not stop nor hesitate in your study of these principles until you have read the book at least 3 times. Then you will not want to stop. How to make practical use of imagination. Ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. Ideas are products of the imagination. Following are 2 true stories about ideas that have yielded huge fortunes. I hope that these stories will convey how important a role imagination can play in turning an idea into success, and that they will illustrate the method by which imagination may be used in accumulating riches. The Enchanted Kettle. In the late 1880s, an old country doctor drove to town, hitched his horse, quietly slipped into a drugstore by the back door, and began dickering with a young drug clerk. For more than an hour, behind the prescription counter, the old doctor and the clerk talked in low tones. Then the doctor left. He went out to the buggy and brought back a large, old-fashioned kettle, a big wooden paddle, used for stirring the contents of the kettle, and deposited them in the back of the store. The clerk inspected the kettle, reached into his inside pocket, took out a roll of bills, and handed it over to the doctor. The roll contained exactly $500, the clerk's entire savings. The doctor handed over a small slip of paper on which was written a secret formula. The words on that small slip of paper were worth a king's ransom, but not to the doctor. Those magic words were needed to start the kettle to boiling, but neither the doctor nor the young clerk knew what fabulous fortunes were destined to flow from that kettle. The old doctor was glad to sell the outfit for $500. The clerk was taking a big chance by staking his entire life savings on a mere scrap of paper and an old kettle. He never dreamed his investment would start a kettle to overflowing with gold that would one day surpass the miraculous performance of Aladdin's lamp. What the clerk really purchased was an idea. The old kettle and the wooden paddle and the secret message on a slip of paper were incidental. The miracle of that kettle only began to take place after the new owner mixed with the secret instructions an ingredient of which the doctor knew nothing. See if you can discover what it was that the young man added to the secret message, which caused the kettle to overflow with gold. Here you have a story of facts stranger than fiction, facts that began in the form of an idea. Just look at the vast fortunes of gold this idea has produced. It has paid, and still pays, huge fortunes to men and women all over the world who distribute the contents of the kettle to millions of people. The old kettle is now one of the world's largest consumers of sugar, thus providing jobs to thousands of men and women engaged in growing sugar cane and in refining and marketing sugar. The old kettle consumes annually millions of bottles and cans, providing jobs to huge numbers of workers. The old kettle gives employment to an army of clerks, stenographers, copywriters, and advertising experts throughout the nation. It has brought fame and fortune to scores of artists who have created magnificent pictures describing the product. The old kettle has converted Atlanta, which was a small southern city, into the business capital of the South, where it now benefits, directly or indirectly, every business and practically every resident of the city. The influence of this idea now benefits every civilized country in the world, pouring out a continuous stream of gold to all who touch it. Gold from the kettle built and maintains one of the most prominent colleges of the South, where thousands of young people receive the training essential for success. If the product of that old brass kettle could talk, it would tell thrilling tales in every language, tales of love, of business, of professional men and women who are daily being stimulated by it. I am sure of at least one such tale of romance, for I was a part of it, and it all began not far from the very spot on which the drug clerk purchased the old kettle. It was there that I met my wife, and it was she who first told me of the enchanted kettle. It was the product of that kettle we were drinking when I asked her to accept me for better or worse. Whoever you are, wherever you may live, whatever your occupation, just remember every time you see the words Coca-Cola that its vast empire of wealth and influence grew out of a single idea. And that idea, the mysterious ingredient the drug clerk, Asa Candler, mixed with a secret formula, was imagination. Stop and think of that for a moment. Keep in mind that the steps to riches described in this book are the very same principles through which the influence of Coca-Cola has been extended to every city, town, village, and crossroads of the world. Now here's the most important thing to remember. The ideas you create may have the possibility of duplicating the enormous success of this worldwide thirst killer. Editor's comments. Harlan Sanders, too, had a recipe in a magic kettle. Actually, his kettle was a pressure cooker, but neither his cooker nor his recipe of 11 herbs and spices would be mentioned here if he didn't also have imagination. Harlan Sanders owned and operated a successful motel and cafe in Corbin, Kentucky. Then, when the new interstate highway came through, it bypassed Sanders' location. In a short time, his business went broke, leaving him with little more than his recipe for fried chicken and a way to make it quickly in a pressure cooker. At 62 years of age, the Colonel, as people called him, had to find a new way to make a living. That's when the magic ingredient, imagination, came in. He decided he wasn't going to sell fried chicken anymore. Instead, he would sell his method for making it. He packed his recipe and cooker into the back of his car and hit the road to demonstrate his fried chicken to other restaurant owners. In the first 2 years, he managed to sell 5 franchises. 2 years later, he'd sold 200. 4 years later, he was up to 600 locations when he was approached by an investment group to sell his company. Recognizing that the magic wasn't just in the kettle or the recipe, the new owners asked Colonel Sanders to stay on as spokesman for the company, which he did until his death in 1980. Today, there are almost 12,000 KFC locations in more than 80 countries with sales of nearly $10 billion a year. Debbie Fields was a 20-year-old housewife who loved to bake cookies. She had no formal education and no business experience, but she had a recipe and an imaginative idea that people would like to buy fresh, hot, soft cookies from a walk-up store. The business people and bankers she approached told her she was crazy, but she and her husband continued to pitch her idea to banker after banker until they finally wore one down enough to give Debbie Fields a loan to open a store in Palo Alto, California. By noon on her first day, she still hadn't sold a cookie, so she went out into the street and gave away samples. That did it. Her walk-in try-a-sample cookie store took off. Today, Mrs. Fields' stores are all across America. Harvard Business School uses her methods as a case study in efficiency, and Debbie Fields has become a best-selling author, an in-demand motivational speaker, and a television personality. Wally Famous Amos was a Los Angeles talent agent who copied a cookie recipe off the back of a bag of Nestle's chocolate chips. He made a few changes to personalize the recipe and started to give out his version of homemade cookies as a sort of calling card. His clients and business associates liked them so much that Wally finally decided to quit show business and open a store. He did it with a Hollywood agent's flair. He opened on Sunset Boulevard with 2,000 invitations, a red carpet, and celebrities. With the same flair, he put his picture on the bag, filled the bags with cookies, and started selling them to exclusive department stores and specialty shops. 10 years later, Famous Amos cookies were a $10 million business. Ray Kroc was over 50 and selling milkshake mixers when he heard about a hamburger stand in California, owned by Dick and Mac McDonald, that was doing great business. He packed his car and headed to San Bernardino to check it out. What he saw was a sit-down restaurant that had a limited menu featuring a good hamburger recipe, and they were serving them faster than any place he'd ever seen. Figuring that if there were more places like this, he could sell them a lot of milkshake mixers, Kroc pitched the McDonald brothers on the idea of opening some more McDonald's. They were interested, but they didn't know who they could get to open the new restaurants. This time, it was a recipe and a magic griddle, but it still needed the extra ingredient, imagination. On the spot, Ray Kroc offered to go into business with them and open the restaurants himself. According to the signs on the golden arches, Ray Kroc's imagination paid off in billions of hamburgers sold. In 1982, Howard Schultz went to work as the director of marketing for a small coffee importer wholesaler called Starbucks, which had only one location in Seattle's Pike Place market. While he was on a trip to Italy, Schultz got the idea that the coffee bar culture he saw in Milan could be transposed to the downtown Seattle scene. He convinced the company to try it. His coffee house idea was such a success that Schultz went out and raised the money to buy the company. 5 years after he joined Starbucks, he was CEO of a company that had 17 locations. 15 years later, Schultz's coffee house culture was on every corner of America, and there were more than 7,000 Starbucks worldwide. As a final example of imagination, we offer Paul Newman's salad dressing. Now, it would seem that it doesn't take much imagination for a big celebrity to put his name on a product, and that's what Newman thought too. But when he and his partner, A.E. Hotchner, pitched their salad dressing idea to companies that specialize in marketing foods, nobody was interested unless they would personally put up about $1 million for the first year's operations. According to Newman and Hotchner's book, Shameless Exploitation, they found out that almost all celebrity products in the food business have been disastrous failures, and now nobody would touch them. So when it came to marketing salad dressing, even Paul Newman's big name wasn't the magic they needed. And unless they were willing to put up a ridiculous amount, money wasn't the magic either. The magic would have to be in the imaginative way that they would convince the right people to help them, and in having the perseverance to stick with it until they succeeded. And just like most everyone with an idea, they were told they were crazy to try it. They were turned down by bottling companies that wouldn't do small runs, and they were rejected by distributors who wouldn't take a chance on another celebrity product. In the end, it was one supermarket owner, Stu Leonard, who helped hook them up with the right suppliers. But even that wouldn't have been enough if Stu Leonard hadn't had enough imagination to see the possibilities and agree to put Newman's own salad dressing on the shelves in his store. 15 years later, Newman's Own Brands was a $100 million company, which gives all profits to charity. This is the end of the editor's comments. What I would do if I had $1 million. The following story proves the truth of that old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. It was told to me by that beloved educator and clergyman Frank W. Gonzalez, who began his preaching career in the Stockyards region of Chicago. While Dr. Gonzalez was going through college, he observed many defects in our educational system, defects that he believed he could correct if he were the head of a college. He made up his mind to organize a new college in which he could carry out his ideas without being handicapped by orthodox methods of education. He needed $1 million to put the project across. Where was he to lay his hands on so large a sum of money? That was the question that absorbed most of this ambitious young preacher's thought, but he couldn't seem to make any progress. Every night, he took that thought to bed with him. He got up with it in the morning. He took it with him everywhere he went. He turned it over and over in his mind until it became a consuming obsession with him. Being a philosopher as well as a preacher, Dr. Gonzalez recognized, as do all who succeed in life, that definiteness of purpose is the starting point from which one must begin. He recognized, too, that definiteness of purpose takes on life and power when backed by a burning desire to translate that purpose into its material equivalent. He knew all these great truths, yet he did not know where or how to lay his hands on $1 million. The normal thing would have been to give up and quit, saying, well, my idea's a good one, but I can't do anything with it because I can't raise the $1 million. That is exactly what the majority of people would have said, but it is not what Dr. Gonzalez said. What he said, and what he did, are so important that I will now introduce him and let him speak for himself. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in my room thinking of ways and means of raising the money to carry out my plans. For nearly 2 years I had been thinking, but I had done nothing but think. The time had come for action. I made up my mind, then and there, that I would get the necessary $1 million within a week. How? I was not concerned about that. The main thing of importance was the decision to get the money within a specified time. I want to tell you that the moment I reached a definite decision to get the money within a specified time, a strange feeling of assurance came over me, such as I had never before experienced. Something inside me seemed to say, "Why didn't you reach that decision a long time ago? The money was waiting for you all the time." I called the newspapers and announced I would preach a sermon the following morning entitled, "What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million." I went to work on the sermon immediately, but I must tell you frankly that the task was not difficult because I had been preparing that sermon for almost 2 years. Long before midnight, I had finished writing the sermon. I went to bed and slept with a feeling of confidence, for I could see myself already in possession of the $1 million. Next morning, I arose early, went into the bathroom, read the sermon, then knelt on my knees and asked that my sermon might come to the attention of someone who would supply the needed money. While I was praying, I again had that feeling of assurance that the money would be forthcoming. In my excitement, I walked out without my sermon and did not discover the oversight until I was in my pulpit and about ready to begin delivering it. It was too late to go back for my notes, and what a blessing that I couldn't go back. Instead, my own subconscious mind yielded the material I needed. When I arose to begin my sermon, I closed my eyes and spoke with all my heart and soul of my dreams. I not only talked to my audience, but I fancy I talked also to God. I told what I would do with $1 million if that amount were placed in my hands. I described the plan I had in mind for organizing a great educational institution, where young people would learn to do practical things and at the same time develop their minds. When I had finished and sat down, a man slowly arose from his seat, about 3 rows from the rear, and made his way toward the pulpit. I wondered what he was going to do. He came into the pulpit, extended his hand, and said, "Reverend, I liked your sermon. I believe you can do everything you said you would if you had $1 million. To prove that I believe in you and your sermon, if you will come to my office tomorrow morning, I will give you the $1 million. My name is Philip D. Armour." Young Gonzales went to Mr. Armour's office, and the $1 million was presented to him. With that money, he founded the Armour Institute of Technology, now known as Illinois Institute of Technology. The $1 million that launched the Armour Institute came as the result of an idea. Behind the idea was a desire that young Gonzales had been nursing in his mind for almost 2 years. Observe this important fact. He got the money within 36 hours after he reached a definite decision in his own mind to get it and decided upon a definite plan for getting it. There was nothing new or unique about young Gonzales vaguely thinking about $1 million and weakly hoping for it. Others have had similar thoughts. But there was something very unique and different about the decision he reached on that memorable Saturday, when he put vagueness into the background and definitely said, "I will get that money within a week." The principle through which Dr. Gonzales got his $1 million is still alive. It is available to you. This universal law is as workable today as it was when the young preacher made use of it so successfully. Editor's comments. The Armour Institute of Technology opened in 1893, offering courses in engineering, chemistry, architecture, and library science, and in 1940 became the Illinois Institute of Technology when the Armour Institute merged with the Lewis Institute, a Chicago college that had opened in 1895 and offered liberal arts as well as science and engineering courses. In 1949, the Institute of Design, founded in 1937, also merged with IIT, followed in 1969 by the Chicago-Kent College of Law and the Stewart School of Business, and in 1986 by the Midwest College of Engineering. Today there are several campuses in downtown Chicago. IIT has been called the alma mater of accomplishments. This is the end of the editor's comment. How to transmute ideas into cash. Asa Candler and Dr. Frank Gonzales had one characteristic in common. Both knew the astounding truth that ideas can be transmuted into cash through the power of definite purpose plus definite plans. If you are one of those who believe that hard work and honesty alone will bring riches, you can forget it. It is not true. Riches, when they come in huge quantities, are never the result of hard work alone. Riches come, if they come at all, in response to definite demands based upon the application of definite principles, and not by chance or luck. Generally speaking, an idea is a thought that prompts you to action because it appeals to your imagination. All master salespeople know that ideas can be sold where merchandise cannot. Ordinary salespeople do not know this. That is why they are ordinary. A publisher of low-priced books made a discovery that has been worth much to publishers. He learned that many people buy titles and not the contents of books. By merely changing the name of one book that was not moving, his sales of that book jumped upward more than 1 million copies. The inside of the book was not changed in any way. He merely ripped off the cover and put on a new cover with a title that had box office appeal. That, as simple as it may seem, was an idea. It was imagination. Editor's comment. For those readers who think that replacing the cover of a book is just too simple, or that they couldn't do it anyway because they are not book publishers, the editors would point out that if you had had that simple idea before the publisher did, he probably would have been glad to sell you those failed books at pennies on the dollar. Then you could have been the one to change the cover, and suddenly you would have been the publisher of a bestseller. However, the idea of replacing the covers wouldn't have meant a thing if you didn't also have ideas about how to market and promote that flashy new cover. And that is Hill's point. Coca-Cola was a recipe, a creative idea. But it would have stayed just a recipe if Asa Candler hadn't also had other creative ideas to market it and the faith in himself to carry through on those ideas. Spence Silver was a chemist working for 3M when, by accident, he created a glue that wasn't very sticky. Needless to say, 3M was not much interested in glue that didn't stick, and Silver's invention was shelved as a failure. But Silver liked his glue, so for 5 years he kept demonstrating it to anyone who would listen. Nobody did, until Arthur Fry, who worked in the tape division at 3M, found that when he was at choir practice, he kept losing his place in the hymnal because the pieces of paper he used to mark his place slipped down or fell out of the book. A little of Silver's not very sticky glue on the slips of paper, and they stayed where he wanted them, then peeled off easily when he was done. That was the eureka moment. They had just invented the world's best bookmark, Post-its. But that's not the end of the story, or the end of the imaginative ideas that were needed to make Post-its happen. Fry would also need perseverance. First, he had to convince the engineers to solve production problems, and to do it, he knocked a hole in his basement wall so he could install a prototype of the production equipment. He stuck with it, and finally, 2 years later, 3M gave the project to their marketing department. The marketing experts put together ads and brochures selling this sticky notepad idea and rolled it out in a 4-city test. The results were a disaster. Nobody got it, so nobody bought it. Who would pay money for scratch paper? The Post-it project was about to be scrapped when Jeffrey Nicholson and Joseph Ramey added their imaginations. Like Silver and Fry, Nicholson and Ramey had faith in the idea because they saw how people in their office fell in love with these little sticky pieces of paper once they started working with them. So Nicholson and Ramey went to Richmond, Virginia, one of the 4 test cities that had failed, and they went up and down the business district, going into offices and giving pads of Post-its to receptionists, secretaries, and anyone else who would listen. Whereas 3M's conventional marketing machinery had failed, giving Post-its to the people who would actually use them did the trick. Once those Richmond office workers started to use Post-its, it didn't seem like a bad idea at all to pay for scratch paper. They got it, and they bought it. The Richmond test turned from failure to success, and soon Post-its were sticking to everything around the world. Here's another simple idea that imagination turned into success. The story began with a man whose problem was just the opposite of Spence Silver's. This man had something that stuck too well. George de Mestral was a Swiss mountaineer who went hunting one day with his dog. But when they got home, they were both covered with burrs. The burrs were so difficult to remove that de Mestral put them under a magnifying glass to learn why. He saw that they were covered with tiny hooks which attached themselves to fur and fabric. That was when the flash hit. If burrs stuck where you didn't want them, why couldn't you put tiny hooks on things so they would stick where you did want them? Like everyone else mentioned in this book, de Mestral had an imaginative idea, but that was just the beginning. He also had the faith in himself to keep going when people laughed at his idea, which many did, until he eventually found a French textile plant that would help him do what he wanted. However, even when they finally worked out a way to use cotton fabric to make what they called locking tape, they couldn't afford to mass produce it. And that's when de Mestral accidentally discovered that when you sew nylon under infrared light, it naturally made little hooks. Now they could manufacture it economically. All they needed was a name. One side was fuzzy like velvet, and the other side was crochet, the French word for hook. Take half vel and half crow, combine it with imagination. The result is Velcro, and a Swiss mountaineer becomes a business tycoon. The Sony Corporation once tried to make a very small stereo tape recorder that would work with standard-size cassettes, but they couldn't do it. They could make a small playback machine, but at the time the electronics needed to also make it a recording machine just couldn't be made small enough. They concluded that the design was a failure. Then one day Sony's honorary chairman, Masaru Ibuka, walked into the laboratory and saw that a few of the engineers were using the prototypes of the failed tape recorder to listen to music tapes. They didn't seem to care that it couldn't record. They just liked to be able to walk around listening to their favorite music. Then came the imaginative idea that made all the difference. Ibuka remembered that another division was working on lightweight headphones. That was the flash. Ibuka's imagination made the connection that the rest of the engineers had not. In Ibuka's view, they hadn't made a failed recorder. They had created a successful private stereo listener. They added the headphones, named it the Walkman, and it revolutionized both the music business and the electronics industry. Clarence Saunders was a grocery clerk in a small southern retail store. One day he was standing with a tray in his hands waiting his turn in a cafeteria. He had never earned more than $20 a week before then, and no one had ever noticed anything about him that indicated unusual ability, but something took place in his mind as he stood in the line of waiting people that put his imagination to work. That was when he came up with the idea that this same self-serve concept would also work at the grocery store. Clarence Saunders took the idea to his boss. Naturally, his boss told him he was crazy. So Clarence Saunders quit his job, went out and did what he needed to do to raise the money, and opened the first self-serve grocery store. He called it Piggly Wiggly, and Clarence Saunders, the $20-a-week grocery clerk, rapidly became the multi-million-dollar chain store groceryman of America. Sylvan Goldman was the owner of a number of Piggly Wiggly stores in Oklahoma, and like any good businessman, he spent a lot of time watching his customers go up and down the aisles, putting their choices into their baskets or net shopping bags. One night, while trying to figure out how to get his customers to buy more at one time, he found himself staring at a basket sitting on the seat of a wooden folding chair. Eureka! He called in his mechanic, Fred Young. They put some wheels on the bottom of the legs, added another basket below the seat, and the shopping cart was born. As this edition is being readied for publication, there are about 35 million shopping carts in America, and approximately 1.25 million new carts are sold each year. Thomas Stemberg, whom we also mentioned earlier, was another supermarket executive who watched his customers as they shopped. By this time, shopping carts were well established in supermarkets, and it was because his customers were pushing shopping carts up and down the aisles that he got his flash of inspiration. He was so sure of his idea that he convinced another supermarket executive, Leo Kahn, to join him. Together, they took the supermarket concept and applied it to selling office supplies, and in 1986 they opened their first store in Brighton, Massachusetts. They called it Staples. In 1989 they took the company public, and 10 years later there were more than 1,000 Staples stores with revenues exceeding $7 billion. We'll end this commentary with another set of connected stories, which make the point that sometimes the most imaginative part of marketing is in the timing. If you were to go shopping in the late 1800s, it usually meant bartering with a merchant who would then have to get the goods from storage shelves kept behind the counter. In the 1870s, fixed pricing was just starting to be used by storekeepers. Merchants were trying the idea by setting out a table of merchandise that was all priced the same, usually 5 cents. Frank Winfield Woolworth was a clerk in a general store, and he convinced the store owner to let him try the 5-cent table idea. Although it worked, the owner wasn't impressed. So Woolworth borrowed $350 from his boss, and in 1879 opened his first 5-cent store in Utica, New York. It was an entire store full of goods where everything cost a nickel. A year later, he had 4 stores, and the 4th one, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was the first that he named F.W. Woolworth's 5 and 10 cent store. 20 years later, he had 238 stores. By the time of his death in 1919, there were over 1,000 F.W. Woolworth locations. He had established the first nationwide chain of general merchandise stores, and he had built the tallest building in New York City as his headquarters. The Woolworth Company stayed true to the original idea and didn't carry any merchandise that cost more than a dime until 1932, when the top price was raised to 20 cents. But as times changed, the fixed price was dropped, the merchandise became more varied, and the company kept growing until it had over 8,000 stores worldwide, selling everything from notions to appliances and furniture. Then in the 1960s and 1970s, something started to happen. The mood of America was changing, but the Woolworth stores weren't. And that was when Sam Walton opened the first Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas, in 1962. Walton got into the retail business after the Second World War, when his father-in-law loaned him the money to buy a franchise Butler Brothers store in Bentonville, Arkansas. By 1962, Sam and his brother Bud owned 16 variety stores in Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. It was in these stores that Sam Walton first started adding the magic ingredient of imagination. In addition to his flair for promotion, Sam tried new approaches to the way household goods and general merchandise could be sold at retail. He insisted on clean, well-lighted interiors, and he introduced the concept of self-service, with aisles wide enough for shopping carts and checkout counters at the front of the store. He also started buying direct from manufacturers, and he created profit-sharing plans that kept his family of employees loyal, hard-working, and neighborly. In 1962, he incorporated those and other imaginative ideas when he opened his first store that he called Walmart. The basic magic was that he sold brand-name merchandise at discount prices, but there was also magic in the way he kept a friendly hometown feel to his store, even though it was what is now called a big box store. Sam Walton's Walmart store was a success, so he just kept building and opening more of them, first in small towns and rural areas, then in larger towns, then big cities, and it wasn't long before he had a national chain. By 1992, when Sam Walton died, there were more than 1,700 Walmart stores. It was the biggest retailer in the country, it employed more than 600,000 people, and Sam Walton was the richest man in America. In 2003, the stores numbered more than 3,200 in the U.S. and more than 1,100 in foreign countries. The company employed more than 1,300,000 people worldwide and served more than 1 million customers a week. Along the way, Woolworths and other older retailers such as Kresge's tried to get on the bandwagon with their Woolco and Kmart stores, but they couldn't seem to get it right. They had given up their old 5 and dime identity to become higher-priced general retailers. And when Walmart came along and redefined that part of the market, the others seemed to have run out of the kind of imagination they'd had in the beginning. Now, here's the twist to the story. David Gold was running a liquor store that he had inherited from his father. He noticed that whenever he put out a display of goods priced at 98 cents or $1, the goods would sell okay, but if his sign said 99 cents, the goods sold out in no time. He decided that he would open a store called the 99-cent only store, where everything would be priced at 99 cents. Sound familiar? Frank Woolworth's imaginative idea from 1879, which had been dropped at his namesake chain by the 1940s and 1950s, had just gotten a fresh shot of imagination from David Gold in 1982. As usual, friends and family told him he was crazy, but David Gold went out to find suppliers who would sell him discontinued merchandise or overproduced products at a price low enough that he could offer them to the public at 99 cents. He found them. And they even had brand-name products of everything from hardware to pantyhose, cleaning products, motor oil, kitchenware, cosmetics, electronics, toys, canned goods, frozen foods, cookies, fresh fruit, even gourmet foods. More than 5,000 items that he could sell for 99 cents and still make a profit. David Gold opened his first well-lighted, brightly colored green and fuchsia wide-aisle store in Inglewood, California in 1982. By 2003, he had 142 stores in California, Nevada, and Arizona, and he was listed on the Forbes 400 as having earned a personal fortune estimated at more than $650 million. As Napoleon Hill wrote elsewhere about the creation of Piggly Wiggly, where in this story do you see the slightest indication of something that you could not duplicate? The plan, which made millions of dollars for its originator, was a very simple idea that anyone could have adopted, yet considerable imagination was required to put the idea to work in a practical sort of way. The more simple and easily adapted an idea is, the greater is its value, as no one is looking for ideas that are involved with great detail or are in any way complicated. This is the end of the editor's comments. There is no standard price on ideas. The creator of ideas sets his or her own price, and if they are smart, they get it. The story of practically every great fortune starts with the day when a creator of ideas and a seller of ideas got together and worked in harmony. Carnegie surrounded himself with men who could do what he could not do, men who created ideas and men who put ideas into operation, and that was what made him and the others fabulously rich. Millions of people go through life hoping for favorable breaks. Perhaps a favorable break can get you an opportunity, but the safest plan is not to depend upon luck. It was a favorable break that gave me the biggest opportunity of my life, but more than 20 years of determined effort had to be devoted to that opportunity before it became an asset. The break consisted of my good fortune in meeting and gaining the cooperation of Andrew Carnegie. On that occasion, Carnegie planted in my mind the idea of organizing the principles of achievement into a philosophy of success. Millions of people have profited by the discoveries made in the years of research, and fortunes have been accumulated through the application of the philosophy. The beginning was simple. It was an idea that anyone might have developed. The favorable break came through Carnegie. But what about the determination, definiteness of purpose, and the desire to attain the goal, and the persistent effort of all those years of research? It was no ordinary desire that survived disappointment, discouragement, temporary defeat, criticism, and the constant reminding that I was wasting my time. It was a burning desire, an obsession. When the idea was first planted in my mind by Mr. Carnegie, it was coaxed, nursed, and enticed to remain alive. Gradually, the idea became a giant under its own power, and it coaxed, nursed, and drove me. Ideas are like that. First you give life and action and guidance to ideas. Then they take on a power of their own and sweep aside all opposition. Ideas are intangible forces, but they have more power than the physical brains that give birth to them. They have the power to live on after the brain that creates them has returned to dust. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first, show it.